In the early years of the 19th century, a quiet revolution began to unfold, one that would forever change the way people communicated. Samuel Morse, born in 1791 in Massachusetts, would come to be known as one of the pioneers of modern communication. His work, though sometimes overlooked in the rush of history, laid the foundations for a new era, one where messages could travel faster than ever before, bridging vast distances in the blink of an eye. Born into a world where communication was limited by the slow pace of the written word and the occasional letter, carried by horse or ship, Morse's life was marked by a relentless drive to transform that reality. His curiosity, sparked by a combination of artistic passion and a growing fascination with science, led him on a journey that would eventually give birth to the telegraph and the Morse code, two inventions that reshaped the fabric of society. As we drift through his story tonight, we are taken back to a time before telephones, before radios, when the idea of instant communication was still a distant dream. The soft ticking of his telegraph echoed the promise of a future where distance no longer separated people, where messages could be sent across the land in moments. Let us gently explore Samuel Morse's life, from his early years to the groundbreaking achievements that marked his legacy. As you listen, feel free to relax, take a deep breath, and allow yourself to drift into a calm, quiet reflection on the life of a man who transformed the world through the power of communication. If you enjoy this journey, kindly consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing where you're listening from. Now, let us quietly begin. Samuel Morse was born on April 27, 1791 in Charlestown, Massachusetts, a small town nestled along the banks of the Mystic River. The year of his birth found the United States still in its infancy, a newly formed nation striving to define itself amidst the uncertainty of a young democracy. It was in this setting that Samuel was born into a family steeped in both intellectual and religious traditions. His father, Jedediah Morse, was a prominent pastor, geographer, and writer, known for his work in mapping the American landscape and his contributions to early American geography. Jedediah, a devout man, was deeply invested in ensuring that his children grew up with a strong foundation in knowledge and faith. While Samuel's mother, Elizabeth, was a caring and nurturing figure, it was his father who played a significant role in shaping the intellectual path that Samuel would follow. From a young age, Samuel displayed a natural curiosity, often asking questions and seeking answers from the world around him. His early education was guided by his father's influence, and he was raised in an environment that placed a high value on learning. His interest in the arts, however, would not be stifled by the rigor of geography and religious study. In fact, it was during his early years that Samuel's fascination with painting began to emerge. At the age of 14, Samuel was enrolled at Phillips Academy in Andover, a well-regarded preparatory school in Massachusetts. The school offered him an opportunity to develop his intellectual abilities further, but it also provided a more artistic and creative outlet. It was here that Samuel's talents as an artist began to take shape. His love for drawing and painting, which would later define his early career, began to blossom in the classrooms and hallways of Phillips Academy. Yet, despite his artistic inclinations, Samuel did not stray far from the intellectual and moral framework his father had instilled in him. He was a quiet, disciplined student, focused on his studies. His early love for drawing was still tempered by his respect for the academic rigor his father expected. The balance between creativity and discipline would remain an essential part of Samuel's personality throughout his life. After his time at Phillips Academy, Samuel moved on to Yale College, where his intellectual development continued in earnest. Yale was a place where Samuel could further explore the depths of his artistic interests, while also immersing himself in the classical education of the time. At Yale, he was introduced to subjects such as philosophy, literature, and science, which would have a profound effect on his later endeavours. However, it was in the art world that he would find his first true calling. During his time at Yale, Samuel's interest in painting deepened. He began to study art more seriously, honing his skills and learning techniques that would later distinguish him as a respected portrait artist. His peers admired his artistic abilities, and he quickly became known for his skill in capturing the likeness of those around him. Yet, even as he poured himself into his art, the intellectual curiosity his father had nurtured in him remained strong. He was drawn to the scientific world and began to explore how the principles of art could intersect with the growing field of technology. In the early 19th century, the United States was a land ripe for innovation. Samuel Morse, while still a young artist, began to be exposed to ideas that would reshape the future. The rapid advances in technology, particularly in the fields of steam power and electrical experimentation, sparked his imagination. At Yale, he began to see how art, science, and invention could intertwine in ways that had not yet been fully realized. Yet, while Samuel had excelled in academics and painting, his future was still uncertain. He would leave Yale without a clear path forward, but it was not for lack of ambition or talent. Rather, Samuel's path would take time to emerge as he faced the challenge of finding his place in a world that was changing rapidly and filled with uncertainty. After graduation in 1810, Samuel returned to Massachusetts to begin his career as a portrait artist. While Samuel was content with his life as a painter, it was not long before he felt the pull of something greater. The world around him was transforming, and Samuel began to feel the weight of a new calling. A calling that would eventually lead him away from the world of art and into the world of science and invention. But for now, Samuel Morse was still very much a man of his time, a young artist looking to make his mark in the world. As we leave Samuel in his early years, still in Massachusetts and at the crossroads of his future, we can sense the quiet determination that would characterize his life. His early education, shaped by his father's intellectual rigor and his own artistic talents, laid the foundation for a life that would eventually revolutionize the world of communication. But for now, he was still a man grappling with the possibilities that lay before him. His journey had only just begun. Samuel Morse's time at Yale University was a formative period that would leave a lasting imprint on both his intellectual and creative pursuits. Enrolling at Yale in 1805 at the age of 14, Samuel was drawn into an academic environment that balanced the classical education of the time with an emerging focus on scientific inquiry. The university, founded in 1701, had been home to many of America's early intellectual leaders, and Samuel was no exception. It was here that he would begin to forge his own path, merging his love for art with an increasing interest in the sciences. Yale's curriculum at the time was rigorous and centered around classical studies, Greek and Latin, philosophy, and literature. But Samuel's interests extended beyond the standard fare. He was introduced to a more modern and scientific worldview, influenced by the growing field of electricity, chemistry, and early experiments in mechanics. While Samuel was immersed in the study of the classics, he also found himself fascinated by the technological advancements of the early 19th century. His artistic talent remained strong, and it was during this time that he began to seriously consider how art and technology could be intertwined. Despite the university's emphasis on traditional studies, Samuel was captivated by the practical applications of science and the emerging fields of invention. The Industrial Revolution had begun to reshape the world, with steam power, textile machinery, and new discoveries in electricity transforming the fabric of daily life. Samuel had always been a keen observer of the world, and he began to take note of how these technological developments could intersect with his artistic vision. It was at Yale that he first encountered some of the fundamental ideas that would later shape his contributions to the world. Although he excelled in his studies, Samuel's true passion during these years lay in his art. He was determined to become a professional portrait painter, a dream that had taken hold of him even before his enrollment at Yale. His love for the visual arts, particularly portraiture, was deeply embedded in his character, and he spent many hours honing his skills. Samuel was known for his ability to capture the essence of his subjects, often rendering them with a remarkable sensitivity to detail. He was particularly adept at capturing the emotions and inner life of his subjects, and his portraits began to gain recognition. During his time at Yale, Samuel had his first serious exposure to the world of science. The growing interest in electricity and experiments with the telegraph, an emerging technology at the time, caught his attention. This period marked the beginning of Samuel's gradual shift from art to invention, as he began to consider the possibilities that lay in combining his artistic eye with the world of scientific discovery. Samuel's growing curiosity about technology would take him on a journey that would eventually lead to one of the most groundbreaking inventions of the 19th century, the electric telegraph. While Samuel's academic pursuits at Yale were rigorous, they did not prevent him from engaging with the creative circles of the time. He was a member of the Yale Literary Society, a group of students who gathered to discuss literature and the arts. His artistic talents were well respected among his peers, and it was through his participation in these discussions that he further honed his understanding of the relationship between art and science. Samuel's friends and mentors at Yale were supportive of his ambitions, and they encouraged him to pursue both his artistic and intellectual interests. However, as the years passed, Samuel began to sense a shift in his path. He started to feel the pull of invention and scientific discovery more strongly than the call of portrait painting. This growing interest in science was catalyzed by the rapid advances in electricity and mechanics, which were beginning to dominate public discourse. The idea of transmitting information over long distances through electrical signals, an idea still in its infancy, caught Samuel's imagination. While he did not yet have a clear vision of how he might contribute to this field, he knew that it would play an important role in his future. As he neared the end of his studies at Yale, Samuel found himself standing at a crossroads. His formal education had provided him with the skills and knowledge to succeed in the world of art, but his curiosity about the emerging technologies of the time was slowly eclipsing his interest in portrait painting. The convergence of art, science, and technology would eventually become his life's work. But for now, Samuel was still uncertain of how to navigate this transition. He graduated from Yale in 1810 with a degree in arts and sciences, but it would take several more years of exploration and self-discovery before he would fully embrace his destiny as an inventor. After leaving Yale, Samuel returned to his home in Massachusetts, where he began to pursue his art career in earnest. He spent time painting portraits of notable figures in his community, earning a modest living. But even as he continued to paint, Samuel could not ignore the growing fascination with electricity and the potential for communication that lay within it. The telegraph in its earliest form had begun to capture his attention, and he began to contemplate how he might be able to contribute to this emerging field. However, at this stage, Samuel was still a young artist unsure of the direction his life would take. Despite these uncertainties, Samuel Morse's time at Yale had given him the intellectual and artistic foundation necessary to embark on the journey that would shape the course of history. The combination of academic rigor and creative expression that he experienced at Yale would stay with him throughout his life. The scientific curiosity that began to awaken in him during these years would lead to one of the most significant inventions in the history of communication. As we leave Samuel Morse at this crossroads in his life, we can see the early seeds of his future success. His education had exposed him to a wide range of ideas, but it was the intersection of art and science that would define his legacy. It would be only a matter of time before Samuel would find a way to combine his artistic eye with his growing interest in technology, a combination that would lead to the invention of the telegraph and the Morse code. After graduating from Yale in 1810, Samuel Morse embarked on a career as a portrait artist, driven by his deep passion for capturing the human form and emotion. He returned to Massachusetts, where he set up his first studio and began working on commissions. His early portraits were highly regarded, and his talent was recognized by local patrons. However, his path as an artist was not entirely smooth. Morse's paintings exhibited a rare sensitivity and attention to detail that set him apart from other portrait artists of the time. He was particularly skilled at capturing the subtle expressions and emotions of his subjects, rendering them with a lifelike quality that was both compelling and engaging. His portraits were often marked by their careful use of light and shadow, giving them a sense of depth and realism that was ahead of its time. Despite his talent and growing recognition, Morse's early years as an artist were not without challenges. As a portrait artist, Samuel often found himself competing with other established painters who had already gained widespread acclaim. Moreover, the emerging Industrial Revolution and the rise of new technologies, such as photography, began to threaten the livelihoods of portrait painters. The advent of photography, which allowed for the quick and accurate reproduction of a person's likeness, posed a challenge to the traditional role of portrait artists. Still, Samuel Morse's love for painting remained strong, and he continued to pursue commissions with dedication. He painted portraits of influential figures in his community, including prominent politicians, religious leaders, and intellectuals. His ability to connect with his subjects, to make them feel seen and understood, gave his portraits a unique quality that was appreciated by those who sat for him. However, even as his career as a portrait artist flourished, Samuel began to sense that his true calling lay elsewhere. During the years that followed his initial success, Morse found himself growing increasingly interested in the world of science and technology. The rapid advances in electrical experiments, particularly the work being done with telegraphy, began to captivate his attention. As an artist, Samuel had always been fascinated by the ways in which light and energy could be used to express emotion and meaning. The idea that electricity could be harnessed for communication sparked a new curiosity in him. He found himself drawn to the possibilities that existed at the intersection of art and science. It was at this time that Morse first encountered the work of some of the pioneers of electrical science. He began reading about the discoveries of scientists like Alessandro Volta and Michael Faraday, who were making significant strides in understanding electricity. These discoveries led Morse to begin contemplating how electricity could be used in new ways, specifically to transmit messages over long distances. The idea of using electrical signals for communication was a novel concept, one that Samuel could not ignore. The convergence of his artistic skills and the scientific advancements of the time sparked a deep interest in telegraphy. While Samuel's primary focus had been on portraiture, his mind began to shift toward the possibilities that existed in electrical communication. The more he thought about the potential applications of the telegraph, the more he realized that it could revolutionize the way people communicated. In this new world, messages could travel quickly and accurately, transcending the limitations of time and space. Morse's interest in telegraphy was not immediate or sudden. It was the result of years of intellectual curiosity and exposure to the rapidly evolving world of science. As he began to learn more about the potential of telegraphy, he also started to realize that his artistic background could serve him well in this new field. His meticulous attention to detail and his ability to understand complex systems of communication would prove invaluable as he began his work on the telegraph. In the early 1830s, as Samuel's interest in telegraphy grew, he found himself in a difficult position. He was still committed to his career as an artist, but his passion for science and technology had begun to overshadow his artistic pursuits. He began to spend less time painting and more time experimenting with electrical devices. Despite his growing fascination with the telegraph, Samuel had yet to make a decisive break from his life as a portrait artist. However, the more he delved into the world of science, the more he became convinced that his future lay in invention, not art. During this period, Samuel began to experiment with different methods of transmitting messages using electrical signals. His early experiments were rudimentary but promising. He began to design a machine that could send electrical signals over a wire, which could then be interpreted as written messages. While these early attempts were not fully functional, they laid the groundwork for what would eventually become the telegraph. As Samuel worked on his experiments, he began to realize that the key to successful communication lay in the simplicity of the system. The telegraph would need to be easy to use and able to send clear and concise messages over long distances. It was this realization that led Samuel to the development of the Morse code, a system of dots and dashes that could be easily transmitted and understood by anyone who knew the code. The simplicity and efficiency of this system would become one of the defining features of Morse's invention. Despite his growing interest in the telegraph, Samuel Morse remained deeply committed to his artistic career for some time. However, by the mid-1830s, he began to realize that the future of communication lay in the telegraph, not in portrait painting. This realization would lead to a series of events that would change the course of Samuel's life, and in turn, the course of history. As we move forward in the life of Samuel Morse, we will see how his early experiences as a portrait artist and his growing fascination with science converged. It was this intersection of art and technology that would eventually lead to the creation of the telegraph, a revolutionary invention that would forever change the way people communicated. But for now, we leave Samuel at the threshold of this new chapter in his life, still balancing his love for art with the dawning awareness that his true calling lay in the world of invention. The early 19th century was a time of rapid scientific progress, particularly in the realm of electricity and communication. The Industrial Revolution was in full swing, transforming societies, economies, and ways of thinking. For Samuel Morse, this era of technological and intellectual growth created a fertile ground for innovation. Although Samuel was still immersed in his career as a portrait artist, the growing field of electrical experiments began to captivate him. It was this changing landscape that led him to pursue the development of the telegraph and ultimately revolutionize communication. In the early 1800s, scientific discoveries were advancing at an unprecedented rate. One of the most influential fields of study at the time was electricity. This fascination with electricity had begun long before Morse's birth, but had gained momentum during his lifetime, especially with the work of pioneers such as Benjamin Franklin, Alessandro Volta, and Michael Faraday. These scientists were not only deepening humanity's understanding of electricity, but also exploring its practical uses, including experiments with electrical currents and conductivity. For Samuel, the potential of electricity to transmit messages over long distances was especially intriguing. He had always been interested in how different forces could be harnessed to serve human needs. Art had given him the tools to understand detail and precision, while the scientific developments of his time gave him the understanding of how these elements could be put to use. What he saw in electricity was a way to bypass the limitations of traditional communication, distance, time, and physical barriers. The idea of using electrical currents to carry messages was still in its infancy, but it held incredible promise. During the 1820s and 1830s, the field of electrical experimentation began to pick up pace. The concept of transmitting signals through wires was discussed by many of the great minds of the time, but while several scientists, including Charles Wheatstone and William Fothergill Cooke in England, were exploring the possibilities of telegraphy, it was Samuel Morse who would ultimately bring the concept to life in a way that was both practical and revolutionary. As Morse began to delve into these ideas, he faced numerous challenges. He was, after all, an artist by training, not a trained scientist or engineer. But his artistic background provided him with a unique approach to problem solving. Morse applied the principles of precision and clarity that he had honed as a portrait artist to his telegraphic experiments. He understood that any invention, no matter how innovative, needed to be simple and effective for people to use it on a large scale. The key, he believed, was in creating a system that was easy to understand and capable of transmitting messages quickly. By the time Samuel Morse began his work on the telegraph, a number of early telegraphy experiments had been carried out in Europe. For example, the French scientist Claude Chappe had created a visual telegraph system in the late 18th century that used semaphore signals to communicate across distances. Similarly, in the early 1830s, Charles Wheatstone and William Cooke in England had developed a system of multiple wires that could carry electrical signals. While these inventions were promising, they had limitations, including complex equipment and the need for multiple wires. Morse, however, was determined to simplify the process. He believed that using a single wire to transmit electrical signals would be more practical and efficient. His first experiments were focused on understanding how electrical currents could be transmitted over long distances. Samuel spent countless hours testing different types of wire, circuits, and batteries. He encountered many failures along the way, but his perseverance kept him moving forward. In 1835, Samuel Morse made his first major breakthrough. He had developed a workable telegraph system that used electrical impulses to transmit messages. But it was his creation of the Morse code, a system of dots and dashes corresponding to letters and numbers, that truly set his system apart. The simplicity and efficiency of the code were crucial to its success. It was easy to learn, and the signals could be sent quickly, even across long distances. Morse code was also flexible. It could be adapted to different languages and contexts, making it a universal method of communication. By 1837, Morse had completed his first working model of the telegraph, a machine that could send signals across a wire using electrical impulses. This was a major accomplishment, but it was only the beginning. Morse still faced significant obstacles, including securing funding and convincing the government and the scientific community of the telegraph's potential. In addition, Morse's invention was competing with other telegraph systems that were already being developed in Europe. Nevertheless, he was unwavering in his belief that his system was the best. He had a vision not just for communication between cities, but for a global network of telegraphs that could link people across continents. In the years that followed, Morse's dedication and persistence would begin to pay off. As he worked to refine his invention, he also sought support from influential individuals and institutions. His efforts were slowly gaining traction. But it was not until he demonstrated the telegraph's potential through a public demonstration that he would win widespread support. In 1844, Morse's telegraph was put to the test when he sent a message from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore, Maryland, asking, "What hath God wrought?" The success of this demonstration proved the viability of the telegraph and marked the beginning of its widespread adoption. The telegraph soon became a vital tool for communication, revolutionizing everything from business transactions to military strategy. Its ability to transmit messages quickly and accurately over long distances made it an indispensable part of society. Samuel Morse's vision had come to life, and his invention was changing the world. As we look back at this period in Samuel Morse's life, we see how his transition from artist to inventor was shaped by the world around him. The scientific advancements of his time inspired him, and his artistic background gave him the precision and attention to detail necessary to bring his ideas to fruition. The telegraph was not just a product of Morse's creativity, but also a response to the rapidly changing world of technology and communication. It was a synthesis of art and science, an embodiment of Morse's ability to see beyond the present and into the future. It was in the early 1830s that Samuel Morse experienced what would become the defining moment of his life, an inspiration that would set him on the path to invent the telegraph and revolutionize the way humans communicated. The story behind this moment is quiet, even somewhat serendipitous, but it would leave a lasting imprint on the course of history. Samuel's journey into the world of telegraphy began when he was traveling from Washington, D.C. to New York in 1832. At the time, Morse was still fully entrenched in his career as a portrait artist. As an established painter, Samuel was familiar with the world of art and deeply immersed in his work. His portrait commissions brought him recognition, and he found satisfaction in capturing the likeness of his subjects. However, this was also a time when Samuel's mind began to wander toward the emerging ideas of science and technology. On this particular journey, Morse found himself seated next to a fellow passenger, an inventor, an academic named Dr. Leonard Gale. Gale was a professor at the University of New York and had been involved in the growing field of electromagnetism. The two men conversed throughout the journey, and it was during these conversations that the idea for the telegraph began to take shape in Samuel's mind. As they talked, Gale shared the exciting developments that were being made in the study of electricity. He spoke about the work of scientists like Hans Christian Ørsted, who had discovered the relationship between electricity and magnetism. Gale explained how electricity could be used to create a force that could move an object, and he made the connection between these electrical principles and communication. Morse, whose mind was already fertile with ideas about improving communication, was intrigued by this possibility. It was in the midst of these discussions that Samuel Morse first considered the possibility of using electricity to send messages over long distances. The concept was simple but profound. If electricity could be harnessed to create signals, then those signals could be transmitted as a form of communication. A person could send a message, and another person, far away, could receive it instantly. This idea of long-distance communication via electrical signals lingered in Morse's mind as he continued his journey to New York. For the remainder of the trip, he contemplated the potential of what had been discussed. The pieces began to fall into place. If an electric current could be passed through a wire, it could produce a signal that could then be understood by a person at the other end. Morse could see the possibility of an electrical system that could bypass the constraints of time and space, something that would allow people to communicate instantaneously, no matter the distance. While the inspiration for the telegraph may have seemed like a flash of brilliance, it was far from a fully formed idea. Morse did not immediately set out to invent the telegraph upon returning to New York. Instead, the idea gestated within him, and he began to think about the challenges that lay ahead. How could he translate this concept into a working model? What materials would he need? How could he create a system that would be simple enough for people to use and understand? What set Samuel Morse apart from other inventors of his time was his determination to make his vision a reality. After all, many people before him had considered similar ideas. However, it was his unique combination of artistic precision and scientific curiosity that would enable him to approach the problem in a way that no one else had. Morse understood that the key to success was not just creating a working telegraph, but creating a system that would be practical and usable for society as a whole. He began sketching designs, testing ideas, and thinking about how to simplify the process of sending messages. He also began researching the growing field of electrical experimentation. Samuel's artistic mind made him attuned to the precision needed for such an invention. He realized that the system had to be not only functional, but efficient. Each transmission of a signal needed to be clear, precise, and easy to interpret. He began studying the works of others, including the discoveries of Alessandro Volta, who had developed the first chemical battery, and Michael Faraday, whose research on electromagnetism would be crucial to the development of the telegraph. Morse's early designs for the telegraph were not immediately successful, but his perseverance never wavered. His background as an artist had given him the patience to refine his work slowly, and he applied that same attention to detail to the development of the telegraph. He realized that communication via electricity would require more than just a simple wire and battery. It would need a code, a way to translate the electrical impulses into readable messages. By the end of 1837, Samuel Morse had developed the basic framework of the telegraph, a machine that could send electrical impulses across a wire and trigger a receiver at the other end. The next hurdle was developing a code that would allow people to interpret these signals. Morse was inspired by the idea of using simple, repetitive elements, dots and dashes, like a musical rhythm. The code he devised, now famously known as Morse code, consisted of short and long signals that could be easily transmitted and understood. The simplicity of the code was one of its greatest strengths. Each letter of the alphabet and each number was assigned a specific combination of dots and dashes, which could be sent through the telegraph. This allowed for quick, efficient communication. Furthermore, Morse code could be adapted to different languages and was easily learned, making it accessible to anyone who could master the basic principles. With these breakthroughs, Samuel Morse began to see the telegraph take shape. What had started as a vague idea during a train ride had now become a concrete vision. It was clear to him that he had the potential to create something that would change the world. However, Even with his breakthroughs, the road ahead was not without obstacles. He still had to secure funding, gain support from influential figures, and overcome skepticism from the scientific community. But his moment of inspiration, sparked by a conversation with Dr. Gale, had set him on a course that would eventually lead to the invention of the first functional electric telegraph. Morse's journey to the telegraph was not a quick or easy one, but it was fueled by the moment of inspiration he had on that fateful train ride. That spark of creativity and insight would change the course of history, allowing Samuel Morse to emerge as one of the most important inventors of his time. In the years to come, his telegraph would not only connect distant places but also help to connect humanity in ways that had never been possible before. With the spark of inspiration firmly ignited, Samuel Morse set to work on developing a telegraph system that would change the course of history. In the years following his moment of insight, Morse focused his energy on transforming his idea into a tangible invention. However, the path to success was far from straightforward. In fact, it was marked by challenges that would test his perseverance, financial resources, and unwavering belief in the potential of his invention. In the early 1830s, Morse's experiments were still rudimentary. He began to refine the concepts he had first formulated during his train journey. The telegraph would rely on the transmission of electrical signals across a wire, with these signals being converted into readable messages on the other end. Morse's first challenge was to design a reliable system that could carry those signals over long distances. At the time, electrical experimentation was still in its infancy, and Morse's knowledge of the practical application of electricity was limited. He began to read extensively on the work of scientists like Michael Faraday and Joseph Henry, whose research on electromagnetism was pivotal in shaping the development of the telegraph. Morse had already been exposed to the basic principles of the electricity at Yale, but now he was diving deeper into the science behind it. He experimented with various methods of generating electrical currents, including batteries and magneto-electric machines, in an effort to find the most reliable source of power for his telegraph. By 1835, Morse had developed a working model of his telegraph, but it was far from perfect. The early designs were clunky and inefficient, and the transmission of signals was unreliable. The apparatus required constant adjustments and tinkering to function properly. Nevertheless, Morse pressed on, testing and refining his designs. His artistic background, with its emphasis on precision and attention to detail, played a crucial role in his approach to problem-solving. He treated the telegraph as an intricate machine that needed to function flawlessly, much like a carefully composed portrait. One of the early issues Morse encountered was the difficulty of transmitting clear and consistent electrical signals across long distances. The technology of the time was not yet capable of reliably transmitting electricity over the kinds of distances needed for a telegraph to be useful. Morse had to experiment with different types of wires, as well as the use of electrical batteries that could provide a stronger, more stable current. He also faced difficulties with the mechanics of the telegraph itself. The devices that could generate and receive electrical signals were fragile and often malfunctioned. Despite these setbacks, Morse continued to refine his telegraph system, undeterred by the technical obstacles. He had a singular vision. He knew that his telegraph could revolutionize communication, and he was determined to bring it to life. During this time, Morse also began to consider the practical applications of his invention. The telegraph, if successful, could be used to transmit important information over long distances, from news to commercial transactions to military communication during wartime. The implications of such a system were vast, and Morse could not help but imagine how it could change the world. The development of the telegraph was not a solitary endeavour for Morse. He sought out the advice and expertise of various individuals in the scientific and engineering communities, even though his ideas were often met with skepticism. Many of his peers were uncertain about the practicality of the telegraph and its potential for widespread use. The idea of transmitting messages over vast distances using electrical impulses was so novel that it seemed almost impossible. Some dismissed it as an impractical fantasy, while others saw it as an unlikely breakthrough with little chance of success. Yet, despite the doubts of others, Samuel Morse continued to push forward with his experiments. He knew that success would require not only technical innovation, but also the persistence to overcome the inevitable failures along the way. For a time, Morse worked in relative isolation, refining his telegraph in the quiet of his New York studio, only revealing his progress to a small circle of friends and colleagues. The real turning point for Morse came in 1837 when he successfully demonstrated a working version of his telegraph to a group of interested observers. This demonstration marked a significant milestone in the development of the telegraph, and was the first tangible proof that Morse's invention could, in fact, work. It was during this demonstration that he first transmitted a signal through a wire, showing that electrical impulses could indeed be used to send a message. Although the message was a simple one, consisting of a few words, it proved the feasibility of Morse's invention. At this point, Samuel Morse faced another critical challenge: securing the necessary funding and support to bring his invention to a wider audience. His telegraph was a remarkable achievement, but in order for it to have any practical value, it needed to be tested over long distances. Morse began to approach potential investors and government officials, seeking the financial backing required to build a working telegraph line between two cities. However, he encountered significant resistance. Many were skeptical of the project, and Morse struggled to secure the funds he needed to move forward. His invention, while promising, was still viewed by many as a mere curiosity, an idea that lacked practical application. Undeterred, Morse continued to seek support for his telegraph project. He was deeply committed to the belief that this invention could change the world. While others doubted him, Samuel Morse refused to give up on his vision. He knew that the telegraph was more than just a tool for communication. It was a revolutionary technology that would transform the way people interacted with one another, changing society on a global scale. In 1843, after years of setbacks and challenges, Morse was finally able to secure the funding needed to test his telegraph over a significant distance. The US government agreed to fund a demonstration of the telegraph between Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. This would be the moment that would either confirm Morse's vision or prove it to be a failure. The experiment would be his opportunity to prove that the telegraph was not just a theoretical concept, but a practical, usable tool that could revolutionize communication. In 1844, Samuel Morse stood on the brink of something extraordinary, an achievement that would forever change the way the world communicated. After years of experimenting, designing and refining, the moment had arrived for Morse to demonstrate the telegraph's potential in a real-world setting. The US government had agreed to fund a test of the telegraph system, allowing Morse to lay a telegraph line between Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, Maryland. This was his opportunity to prove that his invention could transmit messages over long distances, and that his vision for instant communication could become a reality. The task was monumental. The journey to make the telegraph operational had been filled with countless setbacks and financial struggles. Samuel had spent years refining the telegraph's design, perfecting the code, and finding a practical way to transmit electrical signals across long stretches of wire. Along the way, he had encountered doubt from skeptics and resistance from those who saw little promise in his endeavour. But now, with the support of the government, Morse had a chance to showcase his invention on a national stage. The telegraph line was constructed in the spring of 1844, with work crews laying the wire over a distance of about 40 miles. The project was an impressive feat, considering the technology of the time. The wire was carried along telegraph poles connecting the two cities. Alongside the construction of the line, Morse continued his work on fine-tuning the telegraph itself. The moment of truth was fast approaching, and the pressure to succeed was immense. If the experiment failed, it would not only be a blow to Morse personally, but it could also set back the development of electrical communication for years to come. At last, the day of the demonstration arrived. On May 24th, 1844, Samuel Morse stood in the telegraph office in Washington, D.C., ready to send the first long-distance telegraph message. His audience was a small group of observers, including government officials, journalists, and scientists, all eagerly waiting to see if the telegraph could truly deliver on its promises. The message that Morse had chosen to send was a simple one, but it held deep significance. He selected a passage from the Bible, "What hath God wrought?" a phrase that not only conveyed a sense of awe and wonder, but also signified the profound impact of his invention. The phrase would later become iconic, forever associated with the birth of the telegraph. As the telegraph signal was transmitted through the wire, the observers in Washington waited with bated breath. On the receiving end in Baltimore, a telegraph operator stood ready to receive the message. For a moment, everything seemed to stand still, and then, with a sudden click, the first long-distance message in history was successfully transmitted. The message arrived clearly, without error, and the crowd in Washington could hardly contain their excitement. Morse's telegraph had worked. The impact of this moment was immeasurable. The successful transmission of the message marked the beginning of a new era in communication. The telegraph could now send messages over great distances in a matter of moments, a feat that had previously been unimaginable. Morse's invention proved that distance no longer had to be a barrier to communication. A message sent from Washington could be received in Baltimore almost instantaneously, an idea that would soon extend beyond these two cities and across the country. The success of the demonstration was met with widespread enthusiasm, though it did not come without its challenges. There were still obstacles to overcome in terms of refining the telegraph system and expanding its reach. Yet, the achievement of transmitting the first message was undeniable. Morse's telegraph was now a viable technology that could be used for practical communication across the country and eventually across the world. The implications of this success were immediately felt in many different spheres of life. For one, the telegraph revolutionized the way news was shared. What had once taken days or weeks to transmit could now be sent in a matter of minutes. The speed with which information could travel opened up new possibilities for business, politics, and social interaction. Governments, businesses, and newspapers began to see the potential of the telegraph for quickly disseminating information, particularly during times of crisis or urgency. In the years following the successful demonstration, Morse worked tirelessly to expand the telegraph network. Telegraph lines were quickly constructed, connecting major cities along the eastern seaboard and beyond. The commercial possibilities of the telegraph became clear as businesses sought to use the system for transmitting stock prices, market reports, and important trade information. Newspapers adopted telegraphy to get the latest news to their readers faster, and telegraph offices began to pop up in cities across the country. One of the most immediate applications of the telegraph was in the military. During the Civil War, which would begin just a few years after Morse's demonstration, the telegraph became an essential tool for communication on the battlefield. Generals could now communicate with one another and with their commanders in real time, allowing for quicker decision-making and coordination. The telegraph played a crucial role in the outcome of many battles, enabling the Union Army to maintain an advantage over the Confederate forces. Despite its many successes, the telegraph was not without its critics. Some skeptics questioned the reliability of the system, while others argued that it was too expensive to build and maintain on a large scale. There were also concerns about the security of telegraph communication, particularly in times of war. Nevertheless, the telegraph continued to evolve, and the benefits of this revolutionary technology quickly outweighed the drawbacks. For Samuel Morse, the success of the first telegraph message was a moment of quiet triumph. He had spent years working tirelessly on his invention, facing financial struggles, public skepticism, and personal doubts along the way. But now his creation was a proven success. He had not only changed the course of history, but had also shown the world the power of human ingenuity and determination. In the years that followed, Samuel Morse would continue to see his invention spread and evolve. but the moment of the first successful telegraph message would forever remain a defining moment in his life and in the history of communication. It was a moment that would not only change the world of the 19th century, but would lay the foundation for the communications technologies of the 20th century and beyond. With the successful transmission of the first long-distance message in 1844, Samuel Morse had achieved something that seemed almost unimaginable in its potential to transform the way humans communicated. Yet, as with any great invention, the true test was in its adoption and expansion. The telegraph, though a remarkable invention, required time, resources, and widespread effort to build the infrastructure necessary for its full realization. But once the spark had been lit, the telegraph spread rapidly across the United States and beyond, forever changing the world in ways that were only just beginning to be understood. In the immediate aftermath of Morse's first demonstration, the telegraph gained a great deal of attention. The success of the message sent between Washington, D.C. and Baltimore demonstrated that it was possible to communicate over long distances in real time, an idea that was previously the stuff of fantasy. Morse's invention was hailed as one of the most important breakthroughs of the century, and it quickly garnered interest from governments, businesses, and military leaders. One of the key factors that helped the telegraph gain traction was its potential for improving communication in business and government. Before the telegraph, news and information were delivered at the pace of physical transport by horse, ship, or train. A message could take days, even weeks, to travel from one place to another. The telegraph, however, was capable of sending a message in minutes, transforming everything from business transactions to political communication. In the years that followed the successful demonstration, telegraph lines were built to connect more and more cities, first along the East Coast and then gradually across the rest of the United States. The first major telegraph line, which ran from Washington, D.C. to New York City, was completed in 1846, and the system quickly expanded. By the late 1840s, telegraph lines connected most major cities on the East Coast, and soon the telegraph began to spread westward. As the telegraph network expanded, so did its uses. Businesses began to use the telegraph to transmit stock prices, commodity prices, and market information. For the first time, it became possible for traders in New York City to instantly receive information about market conditions in Chicago or New Orleans. The financial world was forever changed, as the speed of communication allowed for quicker decisions and faster reactions to market movements. The advent of the telegraph also had a profound impact on the press. Newspapers, which had previously relied on the slow delivery of news via mail or carrier, were now able to access information instantly through telegraph connections. News outlets began to rely on telegraphy for the delivery of stories, particularly those that were urgent or breaking. The telegraph allowed newspapers to print fresh news from far-off places, enabling them to keep their readers up to date in a way that had never before been possible. In fact, the first international news service, the Associated Press, was founded in 1846 with the goal of gathering and distributing news via telegraph. As the telegraph network continued to expand, it reached further and further into the world. The first transatlantic telegraph cable was completed in 1858, connecting Europe with North America. This was a monumental achievement, as it allowed messages to be sent between the two continents almost instantaneously. Although the first transatlantic cable was not immediately reliable, its success marked a significant milestone in the development of the telegraph. Within a few decades, more reliable undersea cables were laid, connecting countries across the globe and establishing a network of communication that was unprecedented in human history. The spread of the telegraph was not confined to the United States or Europe. As global trade and commerce expanded, the telegraph became an essential tool for international communication. In places as far-flung as India, Australia, and South America, telegraph lines were constructed to connect these regions with the rest of the world. By the end of the 19th century, the telegraph had become a ubiquitous presence in daily life, linking people across vast distances in a way that had once seemed impossible. Morse's telegraph also played a critical role during times of war. The American Civil War, 1861 to 1865, marked a period of intense telegraph use, as both the Union and Confederate forces relied heavily on telegraph lines for communication. The ability to send orders and updates almost instantaneously had a profound impact on military strategy. Generals could now communicate with their troops in real time, allowing them to coordinate efforts and respond to changing situations with unprecedented speed. The telegraph helped to shape the course of the Civil War, as both sides recognized its importance in gaining an advantage on the battlefield. The speed and efficiency of the telegraph also made it a vital tool in diplomacy. Governments around the world began to use the telegraph to communicate with their ambassadors and consuls abroad. This allowed for more efficient management of international relations, as messages could be sent quickly to address diplomatic concerns or crises. The telegraph became an essential tool for statesmen and diplomats, enabling them to maintain control over far-reaching empires and interests. As the telegraph network continued to grow, Samuel Morse's invention became more and more ingrained in the fabric of society. People began to take the telegraph for granted, viewing it as a normal part of their everyday lives. What had once seemed like a technological marvel was now a routine method of communication. Morse's telegraph had gone from a novel experiment to a cornerstone of modern society, revolutionizing how information was shared, business was conducted, and wars were fought. The rapid expansion of the telegraph network, however, did not come without challenges. One of the greatest difficulties was the cost of building and maintaining telegraph lines. These lines had to be carefully constructed, often over difficult terrain, and the wires needed to be constantly maintained to ensure proper functionality. In remote areas, where the construction of telegraph lines was particularly difficult, it was often up to local governments and businesses to provide funding for the necessary infrastructure. Despite these challenges, the telegraph continued to spread, driven by its immense potential to change the world. Samuel Morse, now an established figure in the history of communication, could only watch as his invention grew beyond his expectations. What had started as a personal quest to improve communication had evolved into a global revolution. As telegraph lines stretched across continents and oceans, Morse's invention had become a critical part of the world's infrastructure. The rapid growth and impact of the telegraph in the second half of the 19th century demonstrated the incredible power of human innovation. Samuel Morse's invention was not just a technical achievement, it was a symbol of humanity's ability to harness the forces of nature for the betterment of society. Through his work, Morse had connected the world in ways that had never before been possible, setting the stage for the further advances in communication technologies that would follow in the coming decades. The success of the telegraph in connecting cities across the United States and beyond was an undeniable achievement. Yet, even after the public demonstration of its potential, Samuel Morse faced significant challenges in gaining the financial and institutional support he needed to expand the system. While the telegraph had proven its worth, Morse still needed the backing of both private investors and the government to fund the large-scale infrastructure necessary to make his vision a global reality. Morse's early efforts to secure funding for his telegraph system were met with resistance and skepticism. Many viewed his invention as a costly experimental venture with no guarantee of success. The telegraph, though promising, required vast amounts of wire to be laid across the country, and the costs associated with its installation and maintenance were significant. Furthermore, many were unsure of the long-term practicality of such a system. Investors and governments alike questioned whether the telegraph could be sustained as a profitable enterprise, and some saw the project as too risky. At the time, Morse's telegraph was not the only telegraphic system being developed. In Europe, inventors like Charles Wheatstone and William Cooke were working on similar systems, albeit with different methods and technologies. Morse's system, which relied on a single wire and the use of his unique Morse code, was competing against these other models, which were often seen as more straightforward or technologically advanced. These competing systems created a landscape of uncertainty and competition, making it even harder for Morse to gain the widespread support he needed. Morse was well aware of the skepticism surrounding his invention, but his belief in the telegraph's potential kept him pushing forward. He worked tirelessly to promote his system and convince others of its merits. He frequently sought the support of influential figures, including politicians, businessmen, and scientists, hoping that their endorsement would give the telegraph the legitimacy it needed to gain traction. Despite his efforts, Morse encountered significant setbacks. Many in the scientific community were dismissive of his telegraph, either because they did not understand the potential of electrical communication or because they were loyal to other telegraph systems. Moreover, Morse's financial situation was precarious. As an artist, he had never amassed great wealth, and the costs associated with developing the telegraph system were high. Morse spent much of his own money on the project, and without external support his efforts were constantly at risk of stalling. Yet Samuel Morse's perseverance began to pay off when he made an important connection in 1843. He successfully lobbied the US Congress for funding to construct a telegraph line between Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. The government, recognizing the strategic value of the telegraph as a means of communication, agreed to fund the initial project. This was a crucial breakthrough for Morse, as it provided the financial backing necessary to demonstrate the practicality and reliability of his telegraph on a larger scale. Morse's success in securing government support for the Washington to Baltimore line was a pivotal moment in the history of the telegraph. It marked the first time the US government officially recognized the potential of the telegraph as a tool for communication. Although the project was still an experimental venture, it gave Morse the momentum he needed to move forward with his plans. The construction of the telegraph line was a significant undertaking, involving the installation of hundreds of miles of wire and the building of telegraph offices in multiple cities. However, the successful completion of this line would prove that the telegraph could be a practical and efficient tool for long-distance communication. Despite this breakthrough, Morse continued to face significant obstacles in his quest to expand the telegraph network. Although the telegraph had been proven to work on a small scale, building a nationwide system required far more resources. It wasn't just about laying wire, it was also about creating the infrastructure necessary to operate the telegraph, including the construction of telegraph offices, training operators, and maintaining the equipment. As Morse worked to expand his network, he encountered resistance from private investors who were hesitant to pour money into what was still viewed as an unproven and risky technology. There was also opposition from competing telegraph systems, which sought to challenge Morse's dominance in the field. In particular, the English telegraph system, developed by Wheatstone and Cooke, posed a challenge to Morse's model, as it was seen by many as a simpler and more reliable method of transmitting messages. However, despite these challenges, Morse remained committed to the success of his telegraph. He continued to secure government contracts and private investments, and slowly but surely, the telegraph network began to grow. As more and more cities were connected, the practical advantages of the telegraph became increasingly clear. Businesses, newspapers, and government agencies began to rely on the telegraph for fast communication, and the public began to see the value of the system. Morse's telegraph was no longer a mere experiment. It had become an essential part of the communication infrastructure of the United States. But even as the telegraph gained widespread acceptance, Morse's work was far from over. He continued to refine his system, developing new technologies to improve the reliability and efficiency of the telegraph. He also worked to expand the reach of the telegraph, laying lines across the country and eventually reaching international markets. Morse's ability to overcome the many obstacles in his path is a testament to his tenacity and vision. Despite facing financial difficulties, skepticism from the scientific community, and fierce competition, he never gave up on his belief that the telegraph would change the world. His ability to secure funding, build relationships with key stakeholders, and continually improve his invention allowed him to establish the telegraph as one of the most important inventions of the 19th century. As the telegraph network grew and expanded, it began to reshape the way people communicated. It bridged vast distances, allowed for the rapid transmission of news and information, and played a crucial role in shaping the future of business, politics, and society. Yet Samuel Morse's journey to bring the telegraph to life was not without its struggles. It was a journey marked by financial uncertainty, technical setbacks, and skepticism from those who could not yet see the potential of his invention. But Morse's determination, creativity, and unwavering belief in the power of his invention allowed him to persevere and ultimately change the course of history. The moment that would forever cement Samuel Morse's place in history came on May 24th, 1844, when the first successful long-distance telegraph message was sent. This achievement was the culmination of years of effort, experiments, and setbacks, but the outcome was nothing short of revolutionary. With the success of this message, Morse's telegraph was proven to work, and a new era of communication began. Morse's journey to this moment was fraught with obstacles. He had faced skepticism, financial hardship, and technical challenges in his quest to build a reliable telegraph system. But the significance of this particular moment, when he transmitted the first message over a telegraph line stretching between Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, cannot be understated. It was not just a personal triumph for Morse, but the birth of a new form of communication that would reshape the world. The message that Morse chose to send on that fateful day was a simple yet profound one. "What hath God wrought?" This phrase, drawn from the Bible, conveyed a sense of awe at the achievement that had just taken place. It was a fitting expression of Morse's own feelings of wonder and disbelief as the telegraph became a reality. The message was also symbolic of the potential of this new technology to transcend distance and connect people across vast expanses of land, to carry news and information instantaneously. On the morning of May 24th, Morse and his team of engineers and operators stood ready in Washington, D.C., while the receiving end of the line in Baltimore waited in anticipation. The telegraph line had been carefully constructed, and the machinery was set up to transmit the message. As Morse prepared to send the first signal, the atmosphere was tense. The success of the telegraph would hinge on the precise transmission of the electrical impulses, and there was no guarantee that everything would work as planned. Morse, however, had confidence in his invention. He had spent years refining the system, perfecting both the telegraph machine and the Morse code that would allow messages to be translated into readable text. With the push of a button, the telegraph would send a series of electrical impulses down the wire to Baltimore, where the message would be decoded by an operator. The entire process would take only minutes, a sharp contrast to the days or weeks it would have taken for a letter to travel the same distance. As the electrical signal travelled from Washington to Baltimore, the excitement among those gathered at both ends of the line was palpable. The seconds ticked by as the signal passed through the wire, and soon the message was received in Baltimore. The operators there deciphered the code and the message appeared in clear text. "What hath God wrought?" The crowd in Washington erupted in applause as the success of the telegraph was confirmed. It was an emotional moment for Morse, who had worked tirelessly for years to bring his vision to life. The telegraph had worked, and the world would never be the same. For those present at the demonstration, it was clear that this new invention would change the way people communicated forever. The message, "What hath God wrought?" was not just a technical success. It was symbolic of the profound impact that the telegraph would have on human society. The ability to send messages across long distances with such speed and precision was a game-changer. It meant that news, information, and ideas could be shared instantly, connecting people across cities, states, and even continents. The telegraph was no longer just an experiment. It had become a tool that would enable the rapid transmission of knowledge and foster greater communication between individuals and institutions. The significance of the telegraph went beyond just business and politics. The technology would become an essential part of daily life, transforming industries and reshaping social dynamics. As the telegraph lines were expanded across the United States and eventually across the globe, people began to rely on the telegraph for all kinds of communication. Newspapers began using the telegraph to transmit news from distant locations, while businesses used it to exchange information about the market and prices. For the first time, the world was connected in a way that was never before possible. The success of this first message was also an important milestone in Samuel Morse's personal journey. After years of struggling to secure funding, battling skepticism, and facing technical challenges, he had achieved his goal. His telegraph had proven to be a practical and reliable tool for communication. More than that, it had proven to be a technological breakthrough that would have far-reaching implications for generations to come. However, the work was far from over. The demonstration in 1844 was just the beginning of Morse's efforts to expand the telegraph network. He now needed to secure funding for further expansion and convince others of the potential of his invention. But the success of the first telegraph message provided a solid foundation upon which to build. It showed that Morse's telegraph could work over long distances and that it could be a valuable tool for communication. In the years that followed, Morse worked tirelessly to expand the telegraph network. More lines were laid, connecting cities across the United States and eventually reaching other parts of the world. The telegraph played a crucial role in the business, military and political spheres, transforming the ways in which people communicated and interacted with one another. It became an essential part of the infrastructure of modern society, and its influence continued to grow throughout the 19th and 20th centuries. Morse's role in the development of the telegraph was central to its success, but it was also a story of perseverance. The challenges he faced along the way, financial struggles, skepticism from his peers, and technical difficulties, were numerous. Yet, through it all, he never wavered in his belief that the telegraph could change the world, and change it did. The first successful message sent on May 24, 1844, marked the beginning of a new era in communication. As Morse looked back on that moment in the years to come, he must have felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The telegraph, which had once been a mere idea in his mind, was now a reality, and its impact was immeasurable. The success of the first message was a testament to his vision, his persistence, and his unwavering commitment to bringing his invention to life. After the first successful demonstration of the telegraph in 1844, Samuel Morse's invention began its rapid expansion, extending far beyond the limited scope of Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. This expansion was not just a triumph for Morse personally, but it marked the dawn of a new era in communication that would spread across the United States and beyond, transforming societies and economies in ways that were only beginning to be understood. The first test of Morse's telegraph system had been a success, but it was clear that the real challenge lay in creating a practical network for long-distance communication. A single successful demonstration would not be enough to prove the worth of the telegraph. Its true value would be measured in its ability to connect cities, regions, and eventually countries. With this goal in mind, Morse and his collaborators began working tirelessly to build a vast telegraph network that would stretch across the nation. In the months following the successful demonstration, work began on laying the first official telegraph lines between major cities. The first line was constructed between Washington, D.C. and New York City, two vital hubs of political and economic activity. The installation of telegraph lines across such a distance required the construction of numerous poles, wiring, and stations, which involved both a logistical and financial challenge. But the potential for rapid communication was too great to ignore. The telegraph's rapid growth was driven by the increasing demand for faster communication in all sectors of society. Businesses, which had once relied on the slow transmission of news via letter or messenger, quickly realized the value of the telegraph. Information about stock prices, market trends, and commodity shipments could now be transmitted in a matter of minutes, giving businesses the ability to react more swiftly to changes in the market. The telegraph became an indispensable tool for the business community, and its popularity spread quickly. Newspapers, too, saw the telegraph's potential to revolutionize the dissemination of information. Reporters no longer had to wait days or weeks for news to arrive via ship or train. They could now receive stories from across the country, or even across the world, instantly. This ability to transmit fresh news in real time made the telegraph a crucial part of the media landscape, and newspapers began to rely on telegraphy to get breaking news to their readers faster than ever before. Governments also recognized the value of the telegraph. The US government used the telegraph for military communication, allowing generals and commanders to send orders and receive updates from the battlefield in real time. This use of the telegraph during the Civil War, 1861 to 1865, would prove crucial to the Union's success, as the rapid transmission of orders and intelligence provided a strategic advantage over the Confederacy. But the telegraph's influence did not stop at the borders of the United States. As the technology proved itself reliable and efficient, it quickly spread to other parts of the world. The first transatlantic telegraph cable was laid in 1858, connecting Europe with North America. Although the first cable was short-lived and unreliable, it was a groundbreaking achievement that demonstrated the potential for global communication. By the 1860s, more reliable undersea cables were laid, connecting Europe, the United States, and other continents. The spread of the telegraph to international markets meant that communication between distant parts of the world could now occur in minutes, rather than weeks or months. The rapid spread of the telegraph was not without its challenges. The infrastructure required to build and maintain telegraph lines was costly and complex. Long stretches of wire had to be strung between cities, often crossing rugged terrain or bodies of water. In remote areas where it was difficult to install lines, the telegraph network expanded at a slower pace. But despite these logistical hurdles, the expansion continued at a steady rate, driven by both the private sector and the government, who saw the value of the telegraph in terms of commerce, diplomacy, and military communication. Another challenge was the competition from other telegraph systems. In Europe, for example, there were several competing telegraph models that used different methods of transmission. The British developed Wheatstone and Cooke telegraph system used multiple wires to transmit signals, while Morse's system relied on a single wire and the simplicity of Morse code. Despite initial competition, Morse's system ultimately gained widespread adoption due to its relative simplicity, cost-effectiveness, and the international recognition of the Morse code. The simplicity of his system made it easier to build and maintain telegraph lines, and Morse's code could be learned and used quickly, even by those without specialized training. One of the most significant moments in the expansion of the telegraph network came in 1861, when the first transcontinental telegraph line was completed. The line connected the East Coast to the West Coast, linking California with the rest of the United States for the first time in a meaningful way. This new line represented the culmination of years of effort and was a monumental achievement for both Morse's telegraph system and the nation as a whole. The completion of the transcontinental telegraph line marked the end of the need for the Pony Express, a method of mail delivery that had been used to carry letters across the country at great speed. With the transcontinental telegraph, messages could now travel from coast to coast in a matter of minutes, and the nation was connected like never before. The completion of the transcontinental telegraph was a turning point for the United States, as it symbolized the growing unity of a nation that had once been divided by vast distances. The telegraph allowed for faster communication, better coordination, and more efficient governance. It enabled people to connect with one another across the nation and around the world in ways that had once been unimaginable. In many ways, the telegraph played a key role in the growth of the US as an industrial and technological power. By the late 19th century, the telegraph had become an essential part of daily life. It had revolutionized not only business and government, but also personal communication. While the telegraph was eventually supplanted by newer technologies like the telephone, its impact on the world of communication remained profound. The telegraph had laid the groundwork for the development of the modern communication systems we rely on today. Samuel Morse, who had started with a simple idea for improving communication, had created something that would forever change the world. His invention had spread across continents, reshaped industries, and united people across vast distances. The telegraph was no longer just an invention. It was a key part of the infrastructure of modern society, a testament to the power of human ingenuity and perseverance. Despite the remarkable success of the telegraph, Samuel Morse's journey was far from smooth. The challenges he faced in gaining the necessary support to expand his invention were numerous, and the road to widespread adoption was lined with both skepticism and fierce competition. In the early years of Morse's telegraph development, the response from the scientific and business communities was mixed. While some individuals recognized the potential of his invention, many others were doubtful. The idea of using electricity to transmit messages over long distances was still a relatively novel concept, and it was difficult for many to fully grasp its practical application. The telegraph, though a groundbreaking invention, was an untested and expensive technology. As with many pioneering technologies, it was initially met with resistance, both financially and intellectually. One of the major obstacles that Morse faced was securing the funding needed to expand his telegraph system. The costs of developing a reliable telegraph network were considerable. The infrastructure required to lay miles of wire, build telegraph stations, and maintain the equipment was immense. Morse, despite his vision, did not have the wealth or resources to fund such an ambitious project on his own. His financial situation was precarious, and for much of the time he relied heavily on personal funds, as well as the support of a small group of investors. But Morse's perseverance in seeking out funding was key to his eventual success. He spent years lobbying for government support, approaching various individuals and institutions with his invention. His most significant breakthrough came in 1843, when Morse successfully lobbied the US Congress for a government contract to fund the construction of a telegraph line between Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. This marked the beginning of a partnership between Morse and the federal government, which would prove crucial in the expansion of the telegraph. However, even with the government's backing, Morse continued to face difficulties in gaining broader financial support from private investors. There were skeptics who believed that the telegraph was a passing fad, a curiosity that would soon fade into obscurity. Many people were unwilling to invest in such a risky venture, unsure whether the technology would ever become a practical or profitable tool. In addition to the skepticism within the financial community, Morse's telegraph system was also met with resistance from some scientists and inventors. Morse's approach to telegraphy, which relied on a single wire and the use of his Morse code, was seen as unconventional by some of his peers. Competing telegraph systems, such as the Wheatstone-Cook system in Europe, used multiple wires to transmit signals and were favoured by certain scientific communities. Some of these competitors viewed Morse's system as too simple, while others believed that it lacked the technical sophistication of their own designs. The competition between telegraph systems was fierce, and Morse's system was not the only one vying for adoption. In Europe, for instance, the Wheatstone-Cook system had already gained traction, and Morse faced the daunting task of proving that his system was superior. In the United States, Morse's system competed with other methods of communication, including the burgeoning use of the telephone and other early communication devices. Yet Morse's single-wire system, with its simplicity and efficiency, eventually triumphed over the other models, largely because it was more cost-effective and easier to build and maintain. Another hurdle Morse faced was the reluctance of businesses to embrace the telegraph fully. Though some industries saw the potential of the telegraph to streamline communication, others were slow to adopt the new technology. There was hesitation, particularly among traditional businesses that were used to slower methods of communication. It took time for Morse to convince these businesses of the benefits of the telegraph. But once its potential for real-time communication became apparent, adoption began to grow rapidly. The first major breakthrough in Morse's efforts to expand the telegraph network came in 1846, when the US government authorized the construction of a telegraph line from Washington, D.C. to New York City. This line was the first step in creating a national telegraph system, and it proved to be a critical moment in Morse's campaign for widespread adoption. The success of the Washington to New York line showed that the telegraph could indeed be used over long distances, and it sparked interest in connecting other cities and regions. At the same time, Morse's telegraph was beginning to gain recognition abroad. The first transatlantic telegraph cable was laid in 1858, connecting Europe to the United States. While the initial cable was not fully reliable, it represented a significant milestone in the global expansion of Morse's telegraph system. With the completion of the transatlantic cable, messages could now be sent across the Atlantic Ocean in a matter of minutes, reducing communication time from weeks to hours. Despite the challenges he faced, Morse remained steadfast in his commitment to bringing the telegraph to the world. His invention was not only a technological marvel, it was a symbol of human progress, a way to bridge the vast distances between people and create a connected world. Morse's persistence, despite financial difficulties, skepticism, and competition, allowed his telegraph to spread across continents, connecting people in ways that had once seemed impossible. Over the course of the next few decades, the telegraph network expanded rapidly. Cities across the United States, Europe, and other parts of the world became interconnected through telegraph lines, facilitating communication at an unprecedented speed. The success of the telegraph led to the creation of international news services, the rapid spread of market information, and the ability to respond to crises and emergencies in real time. By the end of the 19th century, the telegraph had become an integral part of global communication. Samuel Morse's journey from struggling inventor to the creator of one of the most influential communication technologies in history was a testament to his perseverance and vision. His ability to overcome financial difficulties, skepticism, and competition was crucial in ensuring the telegraph's success. Despite the obstacles, Morse's belief in his invention remained unshaken. The telegraph changed the world, and Morse's contribution to the world of communication remains one of the greatest achievements of the 19th century. As the telegraph network expanded across the United States and internationally, Samuel Morse's life continued to evolve, shaped by both the success of his invention and the personal challenges that accompanied it. By the mid-1800s, the telegraph had become an essential tool for communication, yet Morse's later years were marked by both triumphs and setbacks as he continued his work in refining and expanding his invention. Despite the rapid spread of the telegraph and its growing importance in business, government, and military communication, Morse did not rest on his laurels. While his telegraph system was being adopted in countries across the world, Morse sought to improve the technology that had changed the world. He worked to refine the telegraph's components, making them more efficient and reliable. The improvements to the system were not as groundbreaking as the invention itself, but they were important for making the telegraph a practical tool in everyday life. Morse's drive for improvement extended beyond the technical aspects of the telegraph. He was also deeply involved in the development of the Morse code, the system of dots and dashes that enabled messages to be transmitted through electrical signals. Although the code had been simple and effective from the beginning, Morse spent years refining and standardizing it, making adjustments to ensure its practicality and ease of use. As the telegraph network expanded, Morse realized that the success of his invention depended on the widespread understanding and use of the Morse code. He worked tirelessly to promote the code, ensuring that telegraph operators, governments, and businesses all adopted it as the standard for communication. While Morse was busy refining his invention, he was also grappling with the financial and legal aspects of the telegraph's success. His financial situation had improved as the telegraph grew in popularity, but there were still struggles to secure adequate funding for further expansion. He faced ongoing competition from rival telegraph systems and struggled with the patenting process, as other inventors and entrepreneurs sought to claim credit for aspects of the telegraph system. Despite the challenges, Morse remained deeply committed to protecting his invention and ensuring that he received the recognition he deserved for his groundbreaking work. In the early 1850s, Morse's personal life was marked by both joy and sorrow. In 1848, he married Sarah Elizabeth Griswold, and the couple had 3 children together. His family life provided him with a sense of stability, yet it was also overshadowed by personal loss. In 1850, his beloved wife Sarah passed away unexpectedly, leaving Samuel to raise their children alone. The loss was a blow to Morse, who had always been a deeply devoted family man. The pain of his wife's death weighed heavily on him for the rest of his life, and it coloured his later years with a sense of melancholy. Yet despite his personal challenges, Morse continued to work tirelessly on the further development of the telegraph. The expansion of telegraph lines, including the installation of the transcontinental telegraph, proved to be a milestone in the history of communication. The completion of the transcontinental telegraph in 1861 marked a defining moment not only for Morse's telegraph system, but also for the nation as a whole. With the new line connecting the East Coast to the West Coast, the United States was now united by a rapid communication network, and the telegraph played a vital role in bridging the geographical divide. Throughout the 1850s and 1860s, Morse's legacy as the father of the telegraph was increasingly recognized. The success of the system was undeniable, and the role Morse had played in shaping the course of history was becoming more apparent. However, even as his invention brought him fame, Morse continued to face obstacles. The continued development of new technologies, including the telephone, posed challenges to the telegraph's supremacy as the primary method of communication. Although the telegraph would remain an essential part of global communication for many years, the telephone, first developed by Alexander Graham Bell in 1876, offered an alternative that would eventually surpass the telegraph in popularity and utility. By the late 1860s, Morse's health began to decline. He was in his late 70s, and the physical toll of his years of work began to take its toll. His eyesight, which had always been sharp, began to fail, and he became more reclusive. Despite the declining health, Morse remained active in his later years, and he continued to advocate for the importance of the telegraph in modern society. He also became increasingly involved in social causes, including efforts to establish a National Academy of Science and a public intellectual life that extended beyond his work on the telegraph. Morse's later years were also marked by controversy and legal battles. As his fame grew, so did the number of individuals who sought to challenge his patents and claim credit for his invention. Morse spent a considerable amount of time fighting patent disputes, but he eventually secured his place in history as the inventor of the electric telegraph. His efforts to ensure the protection of his work demonstrated his determination to safeguard the invention that had become his life's work. Though he lived through a period of great technological change, Samuel Morse remained proud of the telegraph and the profound impact it had on the world. He was fully aware of the revolution he had helped create, a revolution that connected people across continents and facilitated the rapid exchange of ideas and information. In his later years, as the telegraph continued to shape the world, Morse was able to reflect on the legacy of his work and the remarkable ways in which it had transformed society. Morse died on April 2, 1872, at the age of 80. His passing marked the end of an era in communication, but his invention continued to live on. The telegraph he had created had changed the course of history, and its influence would be felt for generations to come. Though Morse was no longer with us, his vision, dedication, and groundbreaking work left an indelible mark on the world. Samuel Morse passed away on April 2, 1872, at the age of 80, leaving behind a legacy that had profoundly altered the course of human communication. His death marked the end of an era in the history of telegraphy, but his invention, the telegraph, would continue to shape the world for many years after his passing. The immediate aftermath of Morse's death saw both recognition of his immense contribution and a continued evolution in the field of communication, as the telegraph paved the way for newer technologies. By the time of Morse's death, his telegraph had already changed the world in unimaginable ways. The invention had become a key part of daily life, enabling rapid communication over long distances. Telegraph lines stretched across continents, and people could now send messages that would have once taken days or weeks to travel in mere minutes. The world was connected in ways that were once thought impossible. Samuel Morse's vision had succeeded beyond his wildest dreams, but his passing left many to reflect on the remarkable transformation that had occurred during his lifetime. Immediately after his death, Morse was remembered as one of the most important inventors of the 19th century. His telegraph had opened the door to a new era of global communication, and it had laid the foundation for the vast network of electronic communication systems that would emerge in the 20th century. While the telegraph's direct influence would eventually be eclipsed by newer technologies, such as the telephone and the internet, it had played a critical role in shaping the modern world. Morse's funeral, which took place in New York City, was a somber occasion, attended by family, friends, colleagues, and admirers. The man who had changed the world was now being laid to rest, but his legacy would not be forgotten. In the years that followed, Morse received numerous posthumous honours, acknowledging his contribution to humanity. One of the most significant tributes to Morse came in 1873, when the US government issued a commemorative stamp in his honour. This was a fitting recognition of Morse's pivotal role in the history of American invention and progress. In 1884, a monument was erected in his honour in Central Park, New York, featuring a statue of Morse. The statue stands as a testament to his contributions to the world and the enduring impact of the telegraph. In the years following his death, Morse's invention continued to be widely used, but it also faced competition. The rise of the telephone, invented by Alexander Graham Bell in 1876, began to overshadow the telegraph in terms of widespread use. The telephone was easier to use, and it allowed for two-way communication, unlike the one-way nature of the telegraph. As a result, the telegraph began to lose ground to the new technology. Yet, despite its decline in popularity, the telegraph remained in use for many decades, especially in the military and in business, until it was gradually replaced by more modern communication systems. Morse's contributions to the world of communication did not go unnoticed, even as the technology he had created evolved. His telegraph was instrumental in the development of global communication networks, and it opened the door for other innovations in the fields of telecommunications, radio, and eventually the internet. Morse's invention was the precursor to many of the technologies that have come to define the modern world, and his work paved the way for the rapid advances in communication that followed. While Morse's telegraph had changed the world, the impact of his invention did not stop at the moment of his death. His work continued to inspire future generations of inventors, scientists, and engineers. The telegraph had laid the foundation for the development of the telephone, radio, and the internet, and its influence is still felt today. It was a transformative technology, not only for its time, but also for the generations that followed. The immediate historical aftermath of Samuel Morse's death also saw a shift in how we viewed communication. As the telegraph network expanded across the globe, it helped to create a more interconnected world. The ability to send messages almost instantaneously allowed for a level of global coordination that had never before been possible. The telegraph made it possible for governments to respond to crises quickly, for businesses to operate more efficiently, and for news to spread at a faster pace than ever before. Yet even as new technologies emerged, the impact of Morse's telegraph remained significant. It was the telegraph that first made real-time communication over long distances a practical reality, and it is hard to imagine the modern world without the groundwork that Morse laid. His invention not only connected distant locations, but also helped create the globalized world we live in today, where information flows freely and rapidly across the globe. Morse's death in 1872 marked the end of an era, but the ripple effects of his work continued to shape the world. His telegraph had connected people in ways that had once seemed unimaginable, and it had sparked a revolution in communication that would eventually lead to the development of the modern communications infrastructure we rely on today. As the years passed, Morse's legacy continued to be recognized. His telegraph had connected continents, revolutionized industries, and brought people closer together. It was an invention that transcended time, laying the foundation for the technological advancements that would follow in the 20th century. Samuel Morse had not only changed the way the world communicated, he had shaped the future of humanity in ways that are still unfolding. Though Samuel Morse's life was filled with personal and professional struggles, his contributions to the world of communication were ultimately recognized and celebrated in the years following his death. His invention, the telegraph, revolutionized communication, and Morse's legacy would be cemented as one of the most significant figures in the history of technology. Even after his passing in 1872, the telegraph continued to influence the world, and Morse received numerous posthumous honors for his groundbreaking work. In the years following Morse's death, the United States and the world at large began to fully appreciate the magnitude of his achievement. The telegraph had become an essential tool in every aspect of life: business, politics, military affairs, and daily communication, and its spread across the globe made Samuel Morse's name synonymous with the very concept of long-distance communication. One of the first major recognitions of Morse's contributions came in the form of a commemorative stamp issued by the United States Postal Service in 1873. This honor was reserved for individuals who had made extraordinary contributions to the nation, and Samuel Morse's name was placed among the ranks of those who had forever changed the world. The stamp featured an image of Morse's portrait alongside the telegraph, symbolizing the union of his identity with his invention. This small gesture marked a public acknowledgement of the tremendous impact of the telegraph on the development of communication networks in the United States and around the world. In addition to the stamp, other honors followed. In 1884, a monument to Samuel Morse was erected in Central Park, New York City. This monument, still standing today, features a statue of Morse holding a telegraph key, symbolizing the connection between his legacy and his invention. The monument serves as a reminder of the critical role Morse played in connecting people across vast distances, a feat that was once unimaginable, but now taken for granted. For the city of New York, the statue became a powerful symbol of progress and innovation. Moreover, Morse's work was acknowledged by his peers in the scientific and engineering communities. Despite the controversies and competition that had existed during his lifetime, Morse's achievements were now universally celebrated. The invention of the telegraph was a landmark event in the history of technology, and Morse was recognized as its architect. The telegraph enabled rapid communication, which transformed industries, governments, and personal relationships across the globe, forever altering the way humans interacted with one another. Over the years, Morse's contributions continued to be honored, especially as the world moved into the 20th century. His invention was critical to the development of future communication technologies, including the telephone, radio, and eventually the Internet. Each of these technologies drew on the principles established by Morse's telegraph, demonstrating just how foundational his work had been. As telecommunications continued to evolve, Morse's legacy was further solidified as one of the central figures in the development of modern communication systems. In 1936, the US government made another gesture to honor Morse's legacy when it held a commemorative ceremony marking the centennial of the telegraph. The event highlighted the far-reaching impact of Morse's invention, particularly on the development of the global communication network. The telegraph had opened the door to instant communication, and over the course of 100 years, it had been instrumental in building the infrastructure that now allowed for near-instantaneous global connectivity. The centennial celebration marked not only the success of the telegraph, but also the continued evolution of communication technologies, which had built upon the foundation Morse had laid. The influence of Morse's telegraph also extended to the creation of the first international communications organizations. The International Telecommunication Union, ITU, founded in 1865, was established to coordinate global telecommunication efforts, and Morse's invention was integral to the formation of such global communication standards. The telegraph was the first step in creating a worldwide network for transmitting information, a vision that would later expand into the telephone and the internet. Morse's creation of the telegraph set the stage for the interconnected world we live in today, where communication transcends borders and reaches every corner of the globe. Beyond the official honours and recognition, Samuel Morse's place in history has been solidified through the impact of his telegraph. The invention not only altered the course of communication, but also helped shape the modern world in ways that were impossible to predict at the time. The telegraph was instrumental in the growth of global commerce, the establishment of international news services, and the coordination of military efforts, particularly during the American Civil War. The ability to transmit information quickly and reliably across vast distances allowed for a level of efficiency and responsiveness that had never before been possible. Although Morse was not always recognized in his lifetime as the true father of the telegraph, posthumous honors have ensured that his legacy is firmly established. His name is forever tied to the invention of the telegraph, a revolutionary technology that reshaped the world and laid the foundation for modern communication. Today, Samuel Morse is remembered as one of the most important inventors in history, and his telegraph continues to serve as a testament to the power of human ingenuity and the enduring importance of innovation. As we reflect on Samuel Morse's life and contributions, we are reminded of how his invention bridged distances, connected people, and facilitated the exchange of knowledge in ways that were once unimaginable. His legacy is evident in every communication network that connects us today, from the telephones in our pockets to the global internet we use to connect with people across continents. Samuel Morse may have passed away in 1872, but the telegraph he invented continues to influence the world, ensuring that his contributions will never be forgotten. By the time Samuel Morse passed away in 1872, his telegraph had already left an indelible mark on the world. Yet, the full extent of its impact was still unfolding. Morse's telegraph was not just a tool for communication, it was a transformative technology that laid the groundwork for the global communication networks that would evolve over the next century. Its influence reached into nearly every aspect of society, from business and politics to journalism and personal communication. The invention of the telegraph revolutionized the way information was transmitted, and it had profound effects on the world economy. Before the telegraph, businesses and governments relied on slow methods of communication, such as mail and messengers on horseback. Information could take days or even weeks to travel from one place to another. The telegraph, with its ability to transmit messages almost instantaneously, enabled businesses to make faster decisions, stock exchanges to react more quickly to market fluctuations, and governments to respond to crises with unprecedented speed. Morse's telegraph also played a crucial role in the development of global trade. As the telegraph network expanded, it allowed businesses to communicate with suppliers, customers, and partners in different cities, states, and countries. Information about prices, market conditions, and trade routes could now be transmitted in real time, allowing for more efficient and streamlined operations. For example, shipping companies could communicate with their ports of call to confirm arrival times and weather conditions, while merchants could receive up-to-date information about stock prices and currency exchange rates. The result was a more interconnected and dynamic global marketplace. One of the most significant applications of the telegraph was in the field of journalism. The ability to transmit news instantly across long distances marked the beginning of a new era in the way information was disseminated to the public. Before the telegraph, news from faraway places was often delayed by weeks or even months, depending on the method of transmission. Newspapers relied on correspondents who travelled by ship or rail to report from foreign lands, but by the time the reports were published, The news was already outdated. The telegraph solved this problem by allowing journalists to send news reports almost as soon as they were gathered. This development was particularly crucial during major events such as wars or political upheavals, where timely information was essential. With the rise of the telegraph, newspapers were able to provide more accurate, timely, and detailed reports. The Associated Press, which had been founded in 1846 to gather and distribute news via telegraph, became one of the most important news agencies in the world. By the end of the 19th century, the AP and other wire services had become integral parts of the media landscape, providing newspapers with the information they needed to keep their readers informed. The telegraph gave rise to the 24-hour news cycle and the global reach of modern journalism, where stories from one part of the world could be transmitted and published almost simultaneously in another. In the realm of international diplomacy, the telegraph also had a profound impact. Governments around the world began to use the telegraph to communicate with their ambassadors and consuls abroad, enabling them to maintain better control over foreign affairs. Diplomatic communications that once took days to travel were now sent in minutes, allowing for quicker responses and more efficient management of international relations. This was particularly important during times of crisis, such as wars or political upheavals, when governments needed to communicate with their representatives as quickly as possible. Morse's telegraph system also had a significant effect on military strategy. During the American Civil War, the telegraph became a vital tool for both the Union and Confederate armies. It allowed commanders to send orders and receive updates from the front lines almost in real time, giving them a strategic advantage. The Union Army, in particular, made extensive use of the telegraph to coordinate movements and share intelligence. The ability to communicate instantly across long distances was a game changer, and the telegraph played a crucial role in shaping the outcome of the war. In the years following the Civil War, the telegraph network continued to expand, and its influence spread across the globe. The technology began to be adopted by other countries, and by the late 19th century, telegraph lines connected major cities in Europe, Asia, and Africa. The establishment of the first transcontinental telegraph line in the United States was followed by the laying of undersea cables connecting North America to Europe. The advent of the telegraph made it possible to communicate across oceans, connecting continents in ways that had never before been imagined. The rise of global communication networks had far-reaching effects on international relations. Governments could now communicate instantly with one another, facilitating the exchange of information, intelligence, and policy decisions. The telegraph made it possible for countries to coordinate military actions, conduct diplomacy, and negotiate treaties in a much more efficient manner. The interconnectedness of the world, enabled by the telegraph, helped pave the way for the establishment of international organizations, such as the International Telecommunication Union, ITU, which was founded in 1865 to coordinate global telecommunication efforts. By the time the 20th century dawned, Morse's telegraph had become a foundational technology in the world of communication. Its influence would continue to be felt as new technologies emerged, such as the telephone and radio, both of which built upon the principles of the telegraph. The telegraph also laid the groundwork for the development of the Internet, as the transmission of data over long distances became increasingly central to modern society. The telegraph also played a role in shaping the cultural landscape. The rapid exchange of information led to greater cultural exchange, as people from different countries and backgrounds were able to share ideas, news, and stories more easily than ever before. This connectedness fostered a sense of global community and helped to break down barriers between nations and peoples. The telegraph, in a sense, made the world feel smaller and more accessible, as it enabled instant communication between distant corners of the globe. While Samuel Morse may have passed away in 1872, his invention continued to shape the world in profound ways. The telegraph had laid the foundation for the modern communication networks we rely on today, and it had forever changed the way people interacted with one another. Morse's legacy is evident in every call we make, every email we send, and every instant message we receive. The ability to communicate across vast distances, which we now take for granted, was made possible by the work of Samuel Morse and the telegraph. As the world moved further into the 20th century, the legacy of Samuel Morse's telegraph continued to resonate across the evolving landscape of communication technologies. His invention, which had once been viewed as a revolutionary breakthrough in the mid-1800s, became the foundation upon which a series of subsequent communication innovations would be built. The telegraph was the first step in what would become an entire network of interconnected global communication systems that now define the way people connect with each other across vast distances. Morse's telegraph opened the door to the development of new communication technologies, but it wasn't long before the limitations of the telegraph itself became apparent. While it had served its purpose as a one-way system of communication, the telegraph lacked the capacity for direct, interactive conversation. It was the telephone, invented by Alexander Graham Bell in 1876, that would revolutionize the world of communication once again. The telephone allowed for two-way communication, enabling people to speak to one another over long distances as if they were in the same room. Bell's telephone, like Morse's telegraph, was grounded in the principles of electricity. The telephone's ability to transmit the human voice over wires was a remarkable achievement, and it represented the next logical step in the evolution of communication. Where the telegraph had relied on Morse code, a system of dots and dashes, Bell's telephone relied on the human voice, transmitting sound waves in real time. The telephone further built upon the telegraph's legacy, creating a more personal and direct way of communicating across long distances. The widespread adoption of the telephone in the late 19th and early 20th centuries slowly began to replace the telegraph as the dominant means of communication. The telegraph, still used in some specialized fields, began to fade into the background as new, more efficient technologies took over. But the spirit of Morse's invention remained alive in the rapidly evolving world of telecommunications. His telegraph had proven that instant communication was possible, and the telephone took that idea a step further by making it interactive. While the telephone had changed communication on a personal level, it was the radio that would bring communication into the mass media era. In the early 1900s, the advent of wireless radio broadcasting transformed the way people received information. Instead of waiting for written messages or telegrams to arrive, individuals could now listen to live broadcasts, from news reports to entertainment programs, all transmitted via radio waves. Radio quickly became the primary means of mass communication, providing instantaneous access to news, music, and entertainment on a global scale. In many ways, radio continued the legacy of the telegraph. Both technologies relied on the transmission of signals over distances, but the radio's ability to broadcast information to a mass audience represented a significant leap forward. The radio's role in the spread of news and culture during the early 20th century made it a defining technology of its time, just as the telegraph had been in the previous century. The telegraph had allowed for real-time communication, but the radio allowed for real-time broadcasting to the masses, making the flow of information even more immediate and widespread. As the century progressed, the emergence of television in the 1940s and 1950s marked another step in the evolution of communication technology. Television combined the auditory aspects of radio with the visual power of moving images, offering an entirely new form of mass media. The ability to see and hear information in real time brought the world even closer together. Television would go on to shape culture, politics, and society in unprecedented ways, providing people with new means of experiencing news, entertainment, and even global events. By the late 20th century, the advent of the Internet fundamentally transformed communication once again. The Internet, born out of military research in the 1960s, began to reach the general public in the 1990s. As the Internet grew, it facilitated the rise of email, instant messaging, and social media platforms, creating an entirely new way for people to communicate with each other, both locally and globally. The internet allowed for nearly instantaneous communication across vast distances and made information more accessible than ever before. It transformed not only how people communicated, but also how they interacted with information, entertainment, and even commerce. The internet also bridged the gap between traditional communication systems like the telephone and newer technologies. With the advent of voice-over Internet Protocol, VoIP services such as Skype, people could make voice and video calls over the internet, combining the best features of telephony with the versatility and speed of the digital age. This convergence of communication technologies marked the culmination of a century-long journey that began with Samuel Morse's telegraph. As the 21st century progressed, further advancements in mobile technology and broadband internet took communication to new heights. Smartphones, which combine the capabilities of a computer, telephone, camera, and personal assistant into a single portable device, became ubiquitous, allowing people to connect in ways that Morse could have never imagined. The rise of social media platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram provided new avenues for people to interact and share information in real time, both with their friends and with the world at large. Morse's telegraph may have been replaced by newer technologies, but its foundational impact on modern communication cannot be overstated. Without the telegraph, the innovations of the telephone, radio, television, and the internet might not have been possible. Morse's invention was the first breakthrough in the development of global communication networks, and it laid the groundwork for the instantaneous exchange of information that we now take for granted. The telegraph also paved the way for the creation of global networks of communication that transcend national borders. The global reach of the internet, combined with mobile technology, has created a hyper-connected world where people from different countries and cultures can communicate and share information with ease. The rapid evolution of communication technologies continues to shape the modern world, and as new technologies emerge, it is clear that Samuel Morse's legacy will continue to influence the future of global communication. The ripple effect of Samuel Morse's invention continues to be felt in the communication systems of today. From the telegraph's inception in the 19th century to the present-day explosion of digital communication, the foundations Morse laid have evolved into the vast and interconnected global network we depend on every day. While Morse's telegraph and its successors like the telephone and radio transformed the world during their time, the 20th and 21st centuries ushered in a new era, one defined by the digital revolution and the internet. The early promise of the telegraph, instantaneous communication, was expanded with the invention of the telephone. Alexander Graham Bell's telephone, patented in 1876, allowed people to talk to each other over long distances, bringing a new level of interaction to human communication. Bell's telephone made the telegraph obsolete for many forms of communication, as people could now speak directly to each other in real time. However, the telegraph continued to play an important role for businesses, governments, and news agencies in the decades that followed. But the emergence of the telephone also began the gradual evolution of communication technologies. The telephone allowed people to have a direct conversation, something the telegraph had not permitted. While the telegraph allowed only one-way communication through coded messages, the telephone offered a more personal form of interaction with live voice exchanges. Soon, the ability to communicate instantly through voice rather than through a complex code expanded the possibilities of social and professional connections across the world. Morse's telegraph also laid the groundwork for broadcasting technologies such as radio that would reach an even wider audience. The invention of the radio in the early 20th century was another leap forward in communication technology. Whereas the telegraph was used for direct communication between specific individuals, radio was capable of broadcasting information to the masses. The advent of radio broadcast during the 1920s opened a new era of communication, with news, entertainment, and music reaching listeners on a global scale. Like the telegraph, radio relied on the transmission of electrical signals, but radio's ability to broadcast sound waves in real time made it the first mass media technology of the modern era. The radio expanded the boundaries of communication by providing entertainment and educational content on a scale previously unimaginable. It introduced the idea of mass communication, allowing information to be shared instantaneously across entire nations and continents. Families gathered around their radios, eagerly tuning in to hear the latest news or to listen to dramas, music, and sports. It was through radio that the world first experienced events such as live broadcasts of World War II and the moon landing in 1969, events that helped shape public consciousness on a global scale. The next major leap in communication came with the development of television. While radio had made the world more connected through sound, television added a visual element, taking communication to a new dimension. The first television broadcast began in the 1930s, and by the 1950s television had become a dominant medium for news, entertainment, and education. The marriage of sound and image allowed viewers to experience events firsthand, providing a new level of immediacy and engagement. As with the radio, television broadcasts expanded the reach of information, making the world feel smaller by bringing international events into living rooms worldwide. Morse's telegraph had sparked the technological race that led to these advances. The telecommunications infrastructure that began with telegraph lines gradually evolved into the telephone networks, radio transmissions, and eventually television networks that spanned the globe. The same principles of transmitting signals over distances laid the foundation for every subsequent communication breakthrough. By the late 20th century, the Internet emerged as a transformative new medium. The Internet combined the rapid information transfer of the telegraph with the interactive qualities of the telephone, radio, and television. Unlike its predecessors, the Internet allowed people not only to send messages and share information, but to interact with each other in real time, share multimedia content, and access vast amounts of knowledge instantly. It connected individuals from all corners of the globe, allowing for communication across vast distances in the form of email, chat rooms, social media, and video conferencing. The Internet was more than just a communication tool. It became a platform for social interaction, commerce, education, and entertainment. With the advent of the Internet, the idea of real-time communication evolved even further. Today we can send a message to someone halfway across the world in an instant, communicate face-to-face through video calls, and access information through search engines within seconds. Social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram have transformed how people interact with each other, allowing for real-time updates on personal lives, political events, and cultural movements. The interconnectedness of the Internet has created a global village where ideas, cultures, and information flow freely. The Internet also introduced the phenomenon of digital communication, which marked a departure from the analog systems of the past. Information is now transmitted in binary code, making it possible to share images, videos, and data alongside text. The ability to share multimedia content has made the Internet a central part of daily life, from streaming movies and TV shows to sharing personal videos and photos with friends and family. Communication technologies are no longer limited to written messages or voice calls. They now include complex visual and interactive elements that change how we connect with others. The continued evolution of communication technology has made it easier for people to connect in ways that were once unimaginable. Smartphones, which integrate the capabilities of the Internet, the telephone, and social media, have further revolutionized how we communicate. Mobile devices allow us to stay connected with others at all times, whether through voice calls, text messages, social media, or video chats. The ease of access to information, entertainment, and social interaction has reshaped society and how we view communication in the 21st century. While Morse's telegraph laid the groundwork for these developments, modern communication technologies are now more advanced than anyone could have imagined in the mid-1800s. Yet, the principles of instantaneous communication that Morse pioneered remain at the core of every technological advancement, from the Internet to the mobile phone. The ability to communicate across great distances in real time is a legacy that continues to shape how we live, work, and interact with one another. Without Samuel Morse's groundbreaking invention, none of this would have been possible. Morse's telegraph may no longer be in widespread use today, but its impact on the world of communication is immeasurable. From the telegraph to the internet, each new technology built upon the foundation that Morse created. His telegraph made it possible for people to communicate across distances that once seemed insurmountable, and it inspired countless innovations that have made the world a more connected place. By the time Samuel Morse passed away in 1872, his invention had already taken the first steps toward changing the world of communication. But the true scale of the telegraph's potential was still unfolding. Morse's telegraph system had quickly expanded across the United States, creating an essential communication network for the country. Yet the ripple effects of his invention would soon spread beyond the borders of the US, touching countries across the world and fundamentally altering how nations interacted with one another. The telegraph's global expansion began in Europe, where governments and businesses quickly saw the advantages of rapid communication over long distances. The first international telegraph network was established in the mid-19th century, and it grew steadily as nations across Europe began to build telegraph lines connecting major cities. By the 1850s, telegraph lines were in place between cities like London, Paris, and Berlin, making it possible to send messages across countries within minutes, a far cry from the days of weeks-long correspondence sent by ship or horse. In these early days, the telegraph was largely used for military and governmental purposes. Governments used the telegraph to maintain better control over their territories, allowing them to communicate with ambassadors and consuls abroad in near real time. The speed with which information could be transmitted gave countries an unprecedented ability to respond to political events, military developments, and international crises. For example, when conflicts erupted in distant colonies, telegraphs allowed colonial governments to report back to their home countries immediately, facilitating quicker decision-making and responses. The telegraph also played a critical role in international trade. For the first time, merchants, traders, and financiers were able to receive up-to-the-minute reports on market conditions, commodity prices, and shipping schedules. By transmitting this crucial information instantaneously, the telegraph helped to streamline international commerce, fostering the growth of global markets. It allowed businesses to make real-time decisions, whether that meant adjusting stock prices, changing delivery schedules, or responding to shifts in demand. Perhaps the most groundbreaking achievement in the global expansion of the telegraph came in 1858, with the completion of the first successful transatlantic telegraph cable. This monumental achievement allowed messages to be sent between Europe and North America almost instantly. Prior to the transatlantic cable, communication between the two continents had been slow and cumbersome, reliant on ships that could take weeks to cross the Atlantic. The cable, laid across the ocean floor between Ireland and Newfoundland, was a feat of engineering that stretched the boundaries of what was considered possible at the time. The first transatlantic telegraph message was sent in August 1858 by Queen Victoria of England, who sent a congratulatory message to President James Buchanan of the United States. While the initial cable suffered from technical issues, it demonstrated the feasibility of the idea. The successful establishment of the transatlantic telegraph line signified the first tangible link between Europe and North America in terms of real-time communication, and it paved the way for more reliable and permanent undersea cables. The significance of the transatlantic cable was profound. It not only connected the two continents, but also ushered in a new era of global communication. The successful transmission of messages across the Atlantic made it clear that the telegraph could break down the barriers of distance, allowing information to travel quickly between any 2 points on Earth. It was a technological leap that would set the stage for future advances in communication, from radio broadcasting to the rise of the Internet. The success of the transatlantic telegraph cable led to the construction of additional undersea cables, connecting more countries and continents. By the late 19th century, the telegraph network had spread across much of the globe. Telegraph cables stretched beneath the oceans, connecting Europe, the Americas, Africa, Asia, and Australia. Major cities in all parts of the world were now linked by the telegraph, creating a truly global communication network. In a way, the telegraph shrank the world, allowing people to communicate across vast distances as though they were in the same room. The growing international telegraph network facilitated even more global interconnectedness. News agencies such as the Associated Press, which had begun in the United States, expanded their reach globally, allowing news to be transmitted instantaneously from one continent to another. The ability to share news in real time meant that global events, from political developments to natural disasters, could be reported and responded to more swiftly than ever before. The telegraph, which had once been limited to small-scale uses, was now an essential tool for international journalism and global awareness. By the early 20th century, the telegraph had become a fundamental part of the world's communication infrastructure. Governments, businesses, military forces, and news organizations relied on it for immediate communication. The telegraph's ability to transmit information instantaneously had irrevocably transformed how societies interacted with one another. It facilitated the flow of ideas, trade, and diplomacy in ways that had once seemed impossible. The foundations of modern global communication had been firmly established. However, the telegraph's reign as the dominant communication technology would not last forever. As the 20th century progressed, the rise of the telephone, radio, and eventually the internet would eclipse the telegraph's prominence. Still, the telegraph remains an essential part of communication history. Without the telegraph, the development of future communication technologies, like the telephone, the radio, and even the internet, would not have been possible. Samuel Morse's invention had started a chain of events that would change the world forever. The telegraph, from its humble beginnings in the 1830s to its global expansion in the late 19th century, had transformed how people communicated, how businesses operated, and how nations interacted with each other. It had connected people across continents and helped forge a new era of global interconnectedness. Though it eventually gave way to newer technologies, the telegraph's influence remains profound, and its legacy endures in the world of modern communication. Morse's telegraph, which began as an idea sparked on a train ride, would ultimately be responsible for the development of the instantaneous, interconnected world we live in today. The world had shrunk thanks to Morse, and the capacity for instant communication had forever changed the way human beings connected. As the world entered the 20th century, the ripple effects of Samuel Morse's telegraph continued to reverberate through the expanding landscape of communication technologies. While the telegraph had already made an indelible mark on global communication by linking nations and continents, the rapid technological advancements that followed ensured that Morse's legacy would endure, with his invention serving as the foundation upon which future innovations were built. The transition from the telegraph to the telephone, radio, and eventually the internet was not immediate, but rather a gradual evolution of communication systems that developed in response to the growing demands of society. Morse's telegraph had introduced the concept of long-distance rapid communication, but the limitations of the telegraph itself soon became apparent. It was a one-way system, dependent on a coded language that required specialized knowledge to interpret. While the telegraph was revolutionary in its time, new technologies began to emerge that would further break down the barriers to instant communication. The telephone, invented by Alexander Graham Bell in 1876, was perhaps the most significant leap forward in communication technology since the invention of the telegraph. The telephone provided a more personal and interactive method of communication, allowing people to speak with one another in real time over long distances. While the telegraph had been limited to written messages, the telephone allowed for direct voice-to-voice communication. It was, in many ways, a natural progression from Morse's invention, and it set the stage for the future of communication. Unlike the telegraph, which required specialized knowledge of Morse code, the telephone allowed for an immediate and intuitive form of communication. People no longer had to learn how to decode signals. They could simply speak to one another. This opened up new possibilities for personal and business communication, transforming society in ways that would unfold throughout the 20th century. The telephone made communication more accessible, allowing individuals to stay in touch with family and friends, businesses to coordinate efforts more efficiently, and governments to respond more quickly to emerging situations. Following the telephone's rise to prominence, radio emerged as the next leap in the evolution of communication. The invention of radio broadcasting, particularly in the early 20th century, expanded the scope of real-time communication to a mass audience. Where the telegraph and telephone had been used primarily for private or business communication, radio introduced the idea of one-to-many communication. With radio, news, music, and entertainment could be broadcast to millions of people at once, transcending geographical boundaries. The invention of radio brought information to the masses, and it quickly became an integral part of daily life. Radio further expanded on Morse's telegraph, using wireless signals to transmit sound, making it more accessible than ever before. During the early years of the 20th century, radio broadcasts became a central part of the cultural fabric of many countries. In the United States, the first commercial radio broadcast in 1920 marked the beginning of an era in which individuals could tune in to hear live broadcasts of news, music, and even presidential speeches. World events such as World War II were broadcast to the masses in real time, bringing distant events into people's homes and shaping public consciousness. By the time the internet was developed in the latter half of the 20th century, communication had evolved once again, opening up new avenues for personal interaction, information sharing, and global connectivity. The internet, born out of military research in the 1960s and evolving throughout the 1990s, brought together the rapid transmission capabilities of the telegraph with the interactive nature of the telephone and the broadcast power of the radio. The internet became the ultimate convergence of all these technologies, enabling individuals to communicate with one another in real time, access an unprecedented amount of information, and connect with people across the globe in a way that had never been possible before. The internet's rise also marked the democratization of communication. Unlike the radio, which was primarily one-way communication, the internet enabled users to both consume and produce content. Websites, blogs, social media platforms, and email allowed for two-way communication, and individuals could now participate in the global conversation, sharing their thoughts and ideas with the world. It was an evolution of the concept of communication, transforming it from a one-way exchange of information to an interactive, user-driven process. This democratization of communication created the foundation for the rise of social media, online communities, and user-generated content. In the years since the internet's development, new technologies have continued to emerge, reshaping the way we communicate. The advent of mobile phones, particularly smartphones, revolutionized communication by providing users with the ability to access the internet, send messages, and make calls from virtually anywhere. These devices combine the capabilities of the telephone, the internet, and social media, putting the power of global communication in the palm of our hands. Smartphones have become ubiquitous, further expanding the ways in which we can connect with one another and access information on a global scale. The internet also laid the groundwork for the development of other technologies, such as video conferencing, instant messaging, and cloud computing. These innovations have made it easier for individuals and businesses to communicate and collaborate in real time, regardless of location. The rise of platforms such as Skype, Zoom, and WhatsApp has made remote communication more accessible than ever before, further erasing the physical boundaries that once limited our interactions. Today, it is common for individuals to communicate across vast distances without the need for expensive long-distance phone calls or physical mail. The development of the internet also gave rise to social media, where platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn have transformed the way people share personal stories, interact with businesses, and engage with global events. Social media platforms have created new opportunities for communication, allowing people to connect with friends, family, and colleagues, as well as participate in global conversations around politics, social issues, and culture. What began with Samuel Morse's invention of the telegraph, a system that allowed people to send simple coded messages over long distances, has now evolved into a complex global communication network. From the telegraph to the internet, the evolution of communication technology has been marked by continuous progress, fueled by the desire to break down barriers and create more immediate and interactive ways to connect with one another. Morse's work laid the groundwork for this ongoing transformation, and his telegraph remains the foundation upon which modern communication technologies have been built. Samuel Morse, the inventor of the telegraph, may no longer be with us, but his legacy endures in every aspect of modern communication. His invention not only revolutionized the way people communicated, but also laid the foundation for all subsequent technological advancements in the field. The telegraph was the first step toward the global communication networks we rely on today, and its influence is still felt in the technologies that connect us now. In many ways, Samuel Morse's telegraph was a precursor to the internet, the telephone, and other forms of digital communication, making him one of the most influential figures in the history of technology. When we look back at Morse's life, we see a man who overcame countless obstacles to bring his vision to life. He faced skepticism, financial hardship, and technical challenges throughout his journey. Despite these setbacks, he never lost faith in the potential of his invention. He believed that the telegraph would change the world, and indeed it did. By the time Morse passed away in 1872, his invention had already begun to transform society, making it possible for people to communicate across vast distances in real time. Morse's telegraph marked the beginning of an era in which information could be transmitted almost instantaneously. It connected cities, countries, and continents, making the world feel smaller and more interconnected. It was the first real example of what would later become the global communication networks we take for granted today. In a way, Morse was the father of modern communication, as his invention set the stage for the digital revolution that would come in the 20th century. In the years following the introduction of the telegraph, Samuel Morse's legacy grew. As the telegraph network expanded, it played a crucial role in a number of important fields. For example, during the American Civil War, the telegraph was used extensively by both the Union and Confederate forces. It allowed for rapid communication between commanders and their troops, enabling more efficient military strategies. The telegraph also played a key role in business and commerce, as it allowed for faster transactions and the transmission of market information. The success of the telegraph also paved the way for other groundbreaking technologies. The telephone, which was invented by Alexander Graham Bell in 1876, was a direct descendant of Morse's telegraph. Both technologies relied on the same basic principles, transmitting signals over a wire, but the telephone allowed for two-way communication, making it more versatile and personal. The telephone built upon the foundation laid by the telegraph, as did radio and television, which allowed for the broadcast of information to a mass audience. In the 20th century, the rise of the internet further expanded the possibilities for communication, allowing people to share information, ideas, and experiences instantly, no matter where they were in the world. The internet is the culmination of the communication advancements that began with the telegraph. It allows for real-time communication, multimedia sharing, and the instant transmission of information across the globe. It is a technology that would have been inconceivable without Morse's original breakthrough. Samuel Morse's legacy is not only evident in the technologies that followed the telegraph, but also in the ways in which his invention reshaped the world. The telegraph helped to create the modern global economy, enabling businesses to communicate and coordinate across vast distances. It revolutionized the way news was disseminated, allowing for real-time reporting of events. It connected people in ways that were previously unimaginable, laying the groundwork for the development of modern social media, messaging apps, and digital communication platforms. Morse's vision of instant communication across long distances was realized through the telegraph, but his legacy extends far beyond that single invention. His ability to combine art and science, his unwavering determination, and his commitment to creating something that would benefit society have left an indelible mark on the world. In the digital age, when communication happens at the speed of light, it is easy to forget that it was Samuel Morse who first showed us that the impossible could be made possible. Without him, the global communication networks that connect us today might not have been realized. While many other inventors and pioneers contributed to the development of modern communication, Samuel Morse's work stands as a foundational piece in the story of human progress. He demonstrated that one person's idea, one invention, could change the world in ways that were impossible to foresee. His telegraph was a transformative technology that not only revolutionized communication, but also brought the world closer together. It is a testament to the power of innovation and the potential of human ingenuity. The telegraph was not just a technological achievement, it was a symbol of what is possible when people dare to dream, to create, and to push the boundaries of what is known. Samuel Morse's telegraph changed the world, and in doing so he opened the door for other inventions that would continue to shape the way we live, work, and connect with one another. As we look forward to the future, it is clear that Samuel Morse's legacy will continue to resonate. The communication technologies that have emerged in the decades since the invention of the telegraph are all based on the principles he pioneered. Whether it is the internet, social media, or advanced communication tools like video conferencing and instant messaging, each of these innovations owes a debt to Morse's vision. While the telegraph itself may no longer be in widespread use today, its impact on communication is profound and far-reaching. Morse's invention created the foundation for the global interconnectedness we experience today, and his legacy as one of the greatest inventors in history will continue to inspire future generations of creators and innovators. The world is connected in ways that were once unimaginable, and for that we have Samuel Morse to thank. As the 19th century unfolded, Samuel Morse's telegraph began to demonstrate its immense utility, not only in business and everyday communication, but also in military and diplomatic affairs. The telegraph's ability to transmit messages almost instantaneously over great distances made it an invaluable tool for commanders in wartime and diplomats engaged in sensitive negotiations. Its revolutionary impact on warfare and international relations can be seen as one of the earliest examples of how technology could shape the course of history, transforming military strategy and global diplomacy. During the American Civil War, 1861 to 1865, the telegraph played a pivotal role in the Union's victory. Both the Union and Confederate forces quickly recognized the strategic advantage of being able to communicate in real time, rather than relying on slower methods like messengers or traditional mail. The ability to send orders from Washington, D.C. to the front lines in minutes rather than days allowed commanders to make more timely and informed decisions. This advantage allowed the Union to mobilize forces quickly and coordinate military strategies more effectively. One of the most important uses of the telegraph during the Civil War was in the coordination of troop movements. Union generals such as Ulysses S. Grant were able to maintain direct communication with the White House and other key figures in Washington, D.C. This allowed them to receive reinforcements or adjust strategies almost instantly. For example, during the siege of Vicksburg, Grant used the telegraph to communicate frequently with President Abraham Lincoln, keeping him updated on the progress of the siege and the status of Confederate forces. The Confederate forces, however, struggled to match the Union's telegraph infrastructure. Although they did attempt to build their own telegraph network, the Union's well-established system of lines, stations, and operators gave them a distinct advantage. Confederate President Jefferson Davis famously lamented that the lack of a robust telegraph network made it difficult for him to communicate with his generals and other key officials. This gap in communication contributed to the Confederacy's inability to respond as effectively to the Union's movements, which played a significant role in their eventual defeat. In addition to its military applications, the telegraph had an equally profound impact on diplomacy during the 19th century. The ability to send diplomatic messages quickly and securely across borders meant that nations could respond to international crises with unprecedented speed. During the era of imperialism and colonial expansion, where tensions between global powers were high, the telegraph allowed governments to react to events abroad with greater agility. One notable example of the telegraph's importance in diplomacy occurred in 1861 during the Trent Affair, a diplomatic incident between the United States and Great Britain. Two Confederate diplomats, James Mason and John Slidell, had been captured by the Union Navy while travelling to Europe aboard the British ship Trent. The British government was outraged and demanded their release, threatening war. The situation was tense, and the telegraph played a crucial role in diffusing the crisis. Secretary of State William Seward communicated directly with the US, ambassador in London using the telegraph, ensuring a rapid exchange of information between the US government and the British authorities. This allowed both sides to avoid a military conflict and to negotiate a peaceful resolution. The Trent Affair demonstrated how the telegraph could act as a crucial tool in maintaining peace during times of heightened international tension. The telegraph also enabled faster and more efficient communication between international embassies and consulates, further enhancing diplomatic relations. This was particularly useful during times of political unrest, revolutions, or wartime negotiations, where the need for quick communication could mean the difference between peace and war. By the end of the 19th century, the global network of telegraph lines was so extensive that diplomatic communications could happen almost in real time, a remarkable feat considering the slow pace of communication just a few decades earlier. The military and diplomatic significance of the telegraph was not confined to the United States. International conflicts such as the Franco-Prussian War, 1870 to 1871, and the Russo-Japanese War, 1904 to 1905, saw the widespread use of telegraph networks to coordinate military operations and communicate intelligence. In fact, the telegraph allowed military leaders to monitor troop movements and respond to battlefield developments much faster than before, giving them an edge in strategic decision-making. The Franco-Prussian War is an excellent example of the telegraph's impact on international conflict. The German Empire had a well-developed telegraph network which enabled them to quickly mobilize their forces and communicate with key leaders across Europe. The Prussian army, under the command of Otto von Bismarck, used the telegraph to coordinate efforts during key battles and to keep the German High Command informed about the progress of the war. This real-time communication helped the Prussians secure a quick and decisive victory, ultimately leading to the unification of Germany and the establishment of the German Empire. Similarly, during the Russo-Japanese War, the Japanese army used the telegraph to communicate with their navy and coordinate their forces, which was a crucial advantage in the conflict. The ability to send and receive intelligence quickly allowed the Japanese to outmaneuver the Russian forces, who were often slow to respond to battlefield developments. The rapid exchange of information allowed Japan to win a series of decisive battles, culminating in the Treaty of Portsmouth, which ended the war in Japan's favour. In the decades following the Civil War, the telegraph continued to play an essential role in global communication, both for military and diplomatic purposes. However, the rise of new technologies such as the telephone, radio, and eventually the internet began to shift the landscape of communication. While the telegraph was eventually surpassed in terms of speed and versatility, its role in shaping modern communication networks cannot be overstated. The telegraph laid the foundation for the instantaneous, interconnected communication systems we use today, including mobile phones, satellite communication, and global internet networks. Samuel Morse's invention of the telegraph not only transformed communication on a personal and business level, but also revolutionized how nations waged war, conducted diplomacy, and maintained peace. The telegraph's ability to transmit messages almost instantaneously brought nations closer together, facilitating greater cooperation and faster resolution of international issues. Its legacy can still be seen in the global communication systems that connect us today, serving as the first step in a long journey toward a fully interconnected world. The telegraph, though now largely obsolete, remains one of the most pivotal inventions in the history of communication. Samuel Morse's creation did not just change the way people sent messages, it reshaped the very fabric of society. The telegraph laid the groundwork for modern communication systems, and its impact can still be felt in the technology that we rely on today. From the global news networks to real-time communication, the telegraph created the foundation for a connected world. When Samuel Morse's telegraph was first introduced, it was revolutionary. For the first time in human history, people could send messages across great distances almost instantaneously. The simplicity and efficiency of Morse code allowed for the transmission of information via a single wire, making it an ideal method of communication for businesses, governments, and military organizations. This ability to send messages quickly and reliably changed the way people interacted with each other, and it had far-reaching implications for commerce, politics, and warfare. One of the first major changes the telegraph brought about was in the world of business. Before the telegraph, businesses were limited by the slow pace of communication. Companies could not keep up with the demands of a rapidly expanding global economy. Messages would take days or weeks to arrive, and without up-to-date information, businesses could not respond quickly to changes in the market. The telegraph solved this problem by enabling businesses to receive information almost instantly, which allowed them to react more quickly and make better decisions. Stock prices, commodity reports, and market conditions could now be transmitted in real time, enabling business owners and investors to make informed decisions based on the most current data. The speed and efficiency of the telegraph also helped streamline global trade. Merchants could now communicate with suppliers, buyers, and distributors across long distances, allowing for more efficient supply chains and a faster exchange of goods. In the years that followed, the telegraph became an essential part of the business world, and its influence helped to create the interconnected global economy we know today. In addition to business, the telegraph revolutionized journalism. Before the telegraph, news traveled slowly, often arriving after the events had already passed. Newspapers relied on correspondents who would send written reports, and sometimes these reports would take days or weeks to reach the editorial offices. The telegraph enabled journalists to send breaking news across the country, and even across continents in real time. This change had a profound effect on the way people consumed news, as they could now receive updates on events as they happened. The speed of telegraph communication meant that reporters no longer had to wait for the arrival of mail or ships to get news from abroad. News agencies like the Associated Press, founded in 1846, began to rely heavily on the telegraph to transmit news stories from all over the world. This allowed newspapers to keep their readers up to date with the latest developments, whether they were political, social, or financial. The telegraph also enabled newspapers to expand their readership by providing the fastest and most reliable method of news delivery available at the time. In this way, the telegraph helped to shape the media landscape and played a key role in the development of modern journalism. In terms of warfare, the telegraph was a transformative tool. The American Civil War, 1861 to 1865, was the first major conflict in which the telegraph played a central role. Both the Union and Confederate forces used the telegraph to coordinate their strategies and communicate with their commanders in real time. The ability to transmit messages instantly allowed armies to respond to battlefield developments with unprecedented speed. Generals could issue orders, request reinforcements, and gather intelligence more efficiently than ever before. This real-time communication gave the Union Army a significant advantage, as it enabled them to coordinate efforts more effectively and make strategic decisions quickly. The telegraph also played a critical role in diplomatic communication. For centuries, diplomats relied on messengers and couriers to carry messages between countries, a process that was slow and prone to delays. The telegraph made it possible for diplomats to communicate almost instantly, allowing for quicker responses to international events and crises. This was particularly important during times of war or political unrest, when fast communication could mean the difference between peace and conflict. The telegraph facilitated international diplomacy by allowing nations to maintain constant contact, exchange intelligence, and negotiate treaties in real time. The impact of the telegraph on society extended beyond business, media, and warfare. It was also responsible for a fundamental shift in how people viewed time and space. Prior to the telegraph, the world was a much slower and larger place. People had to wait days, weeks, or even months for information to travel from one location to another. The telegraph compressed time, making the world feel smaller and more connected. For the first time, people could communicate with one another across vast distances without having to wait for lengthy delays. This shift in how time and space were perceived laid the groundwork for the subsequent advancements in communication technologies. The telegraph was the precursor to the telephone, the radio, and eventually the internet, all of which have made it possible for people to connect with one another in real time, no matter where they are in the world. The instantaneity of communication that Morse's telegraph introduced became the hallmark of modern technology, where information is shared in real time across the globe. The telegraph was the first step in the creation of the global communication systems we take for granted today. Moreover, the rise of the telegraph inspired a new generation of inventors and scientists to explore the possibilities of electrical communication. Many of the technologies that followed, including the telephone, radio, and television, built on the principles of Morse's telegraph. The telegraph's impact on communication extended well beyond its use in business and government. It changed the very way people interacted with each other, influencing everything from the speed at which information was exchanged to the way societies were structured and connected. While the telegraph itself has been largely replaced by newer technologies, its legacy is undeniable. It remains one of the most important inventions in the history of communication, and it laid the groundwork for the digital revolution that would follow. Samuel Morse's vision of instant communication across vast distances transformed the world, making it a smaller, more interconnected place. The changes brought about by the telegraph were not just technological, they were societal, cultural, and global, shaping the world we live in today. As the 20th century progressed, the world witnessed the rapid evolution of communication technologies that built upon the foundation Samuel Morse had laid with his invention of the telegraph. In the decades that followed, the telegraph was eclipsed by new innovations, each one more advanced than the last, yet each still owed its existence to the pioneering work of Morse and the telegraph system he had developed. These innovations, such as the telephone, radio, television, and eventually the internet, all transformed how people connected, communicated, and shared ideas. In many ways, the telegraph was a precursor to the broader wave of digital communication that we now take for granted. The digital age, which began with the rise of computers and the internet in the latter half of the 20th century, marks the culmination of centuries of progress in the world of communication. The rapid transmission of information that was first made possible by the telegraph laid the groundwork for a new world, one where ideas, images, and data can be transmitted instantly from anywhere in the world to anywhere else. The internet, arguably the most significant communication breakthrough of the late 20th century, can be traced back to Morse's vision of instant communication across vast distances. Today, we're no longer bound by wires and Morse code. Our messages, photos, videos, and thoughts can travel the globe with a click of a button. The internet allows for real-time communication through a wide array of platforms: social media, email, instant messaging, and video calls, to name just a few. It enables individuals, businesses, and governments to communicate with one another at unprecedented speeds, effectively teleporting ideas, information, and conversations across the world in an instant. In a sense, the internet is the ultimate manifestation of Morse's original goal: breaking the barriers of time and space to create a world where communication knows no bounds. In the same way that the telegraph made it possible for people to send messages instantly over long distances, The internet allows us to connect with anyone, anywhere, at any time. The ease and speed with which we can now communicate, whether via text, voice, or video, would have been unimaginable in Morse's time. Yet the principles of instantaneous communication remain the same. The rise of the internet and the digitization of communication have had profound effects on the global landscape. The democratization of information, powered by the internet, has transformed industries, governments, and societies. Individuals now have access to a virtually limitless stream of information, from news outlets and academic journals to social media and blogs. Ideas and opinions, once confined to small groups or local communities, can now be shared with the world at the click of a mouse. This shift has not only altered the way people interact with each other, but also how they consume information and engage with the world around them. The internet has also paved the way for a more connected global economy. The ease with which businesses can now communicate and share information across borders has led to the rise of international trade, global supply chains, and the digital marketplace. Companies that once relied on the slow transmission of goods and information are now able to operate seamlessly in real time, reaching customers and partners around the world. The digital revolution has made it possible for even the smallest businesses to expand their reach beyond local borders, creating new opportunities for entrepreneurship and global collaboration. On a personal level, the digital age has transformed how we interact with one another. Social media platforms, online forums, and messaging apps have created spaces where people can connect with others who share their interests, passions, or concerns, regardless of geographical location. The ability to interact with individuals from different cultures and backgrounds has helped foster a more global perspective and has broken down many of the barriers that once divided people. It's an evolution of the social aspects of communication, as it's now easier than ever to stay in touch with loved ones, colleagues, or friends from afar. This teleportation of ideas and information has also made its mark on politics and global affairs. International communication, once a slow and cumbersome process, now takes place in real time. Governments, political leaders, and activists can communicate instantly with their constituencies and with other nations, helping to shape political discourse and action in ways that were previously impossible. Social media platforms have become powerful tools for political movements and activism, allowing individuals to organize, mobilize, and amplify their voices on a global stage. While the internet has brought numerous benefits, it has also presented new challenges, particularly in the areas of privacy, security, and misinformation. The rapid flow of information has made it difficult to distinguish between fact and fiction, as false or misleading information can be spread with the same ease as legitimate news. Similarly, the digital age has raised concerns about the privacy of personal information, as individuals and organizations increasingly rely on the internet for everything from banking and shopping to socializing and working. The challenge of maintaining privacy and security in a digital world is one that continues to evolve as technology advances. Despite these challenges, the digital age represents the latest chapter in a long history of communication innovations, all of which owe their existence to the pioneering work of Samuel Morse. Morse's telegraph was the first major step toward creating a world where instant communication is the norm, and it opened the door for the development of the telephone, radio, television, and ultimately the internet. Today, the world is more interconnected than ever, and communication has become an integral part of daily life. We are able to connect with others in ways that would have been unimaginable in Morse's time, and the telegraph's legacy is still at the core of all these advances. In the 21st century, we now live in a world where communication is nearly instantaneous. The internet, which was born from the principles of electrical communication first pioneered by Morse, has made it possible for anyone with a computer or smartphone to reach people anywhere in the world. We can send emails, share photos, watch videos, and engage in video calls with just a few clicks. The digital age has not only connected us in ways that Samuel Morse could have only dreamed of, but it has also opened up new possibilities for how we communicate and share ideas. While Morse's telegraph may no longer be in widespread use, its impact on modern communication is undeniable. The technologies we use today, whether it's email, instant messaging, or social media, are all built on the foundations laid by Morse. In many ways, we live in a world that is a direct extension of his vision, a world where ideas, information, and communication flow freely, instantly, and across the globe. Give me the next segment. Important note, each segment should have 1,000 words or less, and all of the script should not be more than 25,000 words. Remind me also when it's time for outro when we reach the very last segment. Please remember that we should have a total of 25 segments. As we reflect on the life and work of Samuel Morse, it becomes clear that his invention, the telegraph, was not merely a tool for communication. It was the catalyst for an entire transformation in how the world connects, interacts, and exchanges ideas. Morse's vision of instant communication, though initially met with skepticism and resistance, would go on to change the course of history. Today we live in a world where instant communication across vast distances is taken for granted, and much of this connectivity owes its origins to the telegraph. Morse's telegraph was more than just an engineering marvel, it was a bridge between distant worlds. Before the advent of the telegraph, communication was slow and often unreliable. Messages could take weeks or even months to travel across countries or oceans, making it difficult to respond to crises, engage in business transactions, or even maintain relationships across great distances. The telegraph eliminated these barriers, allowing people to send messages across the country or around the world in mere minutes. This instantaneous transfer of information set the stage for the modern communication systems that are now an integral part of daily life. The ripple effects of the telegraph extended far beyond the communication systems we rely on today. The rapid transmission of information changed the way people interacted with the world and one another. It allowed for the creation of global networks that connected people across vast distances and fostered collaboration and exchange in ways that were previously unimaginable. It influenced everything from business practices to global diplomacy, revolutionizing industries and shaping the modern world in ways that continue to unfold. Morse's telegraph also played a key role in military strategy, particularly during the American Civil War. The ability to communicate instantly across long distances gave commanders the ability to coordinate efforts, send reinforcements, and respond to changing circumstances in real time. The telegraph was a force multiplier, allowing armies to operate with greater efficiency and precision. Similarly, in the realm of diplomacy, the telegraph allowed governments to communicate quickly and coordinate their actions on the world stage, fostering faster decision-making and facilitating the resolution of international crises. Yet, as revolutionary as the telegraph was, it was only the beginning of a much larger technological evolution. The principles of instant communication that Morse introduced with the telegraph became the foundation for the telephone, radio, television, and eventually the internet. Each of these technologies built upon the telegraph's ability to transmit messages rapidly over long distances, but they also expanded on the original idea by introducing new forms of communication, from voice and images to multimedia content. The telegraph made possible the era of mass media and connected the world in ways that were unimaginable before its invention. In the digital age, we now live in a world where communication is almost entirely instant. We can send emails, make video calls, and share information on social media with just a few clicks, connecting with people across the globe. The internet, which allows for the rapid exchange of information in the form of text, audio, video, and more, can trace its roots back to the principles of electrical communication that Morse introduced with the telegraph. The digital revolution, which has transformed nearly every aspect of society, was made possible by the communication breakthroughs that began with Morse's telegraph. Morse's telegraph also opened the door for the development of other forms of communication, such as radio and television, which further expanded the scope of instant communication to mass audiences. Radio broadcasting, which allowed information to be transmitted over the airwaves, ushered in the era of mass communication, providing people with real-time access to news, entertainment, and political developments. Television, combining sound and visuals, further revolutionized communication by making information more accessible and immersive. The influence of Morse's telegraph did not stop with the advent of radio or television. It laid the groundwork for the technologies that would eventually give rise to the Internet and the World Wide Web. The Internet, which allows us to connect instantly with anyone, anywhere, and access vast amounts of information, can trace its lineage directly back to Morse's telegraph. The telegraph created the framework for a world where communication is not just faster, but more connected than ever before. It's the reason why we can now connect with people across continents in real time, share ideas instantly, and access information at the touch of a button. Looking back on Morse's life, it's impossible to ignore the profound impact his invention had on the course of history. He may have lived in a time when the world was still divided by vast physical distances, but his vision bridged those gaps, laying the groundwork for the interconnected world we live in today. The telegraph transformed society, opening the door for new innovations and creating a new way of thinking about communication. As we consider the legacy of Samuel Morse, we recognize that his work was about more than just sending messages. It was about connecting people, sharing ideas, and fostering a new sense of global community. The telegraph was the first step in creating a world where distance was no longer a barrier to communication, where information could travel instantly, and where people could stay connected regardless of where they lived. In a world where communication is now defined by speed and accessibility, it is important to remember that it all began with Samuel Morse's simple but revolutionary invention, the telegraph. In closing, while the telegraph may no longer be in widespread use today, its impact is still felt in every conversation we have, every email we send, and every piece of information we share online. Samuel Morse's invention was the catalyst for the modern communication systems that connect us all, and his legacy continues to shape the world in ways that extend far beyond the limits of his time. Morse's vision of instant communication across vast distances has become a reality, and the world will forever be indebted to him for that first, crucial step toward a more interconnected future.